Chapter 1110. The Great Ming Luan, who had received Yu Qianqiu's secret message, also felt that it was inappropriate to stay here for Yu Qianqiu's safety. However, when he heard the underworld saintess's words, he felt that there was still a chance, so he asked Yu Qianqiu to wait for an opportunity. Jintai raised his sword-like eyebrows and stared at the underworld saintess with a murderous look. "You shameless bitch! Do you really think that I don't dare to kill you?" Bai Qi frowned slightly. He stood in front of Jintai and said sternly, "Jintai, what do you want to do? Now is not the time to have internal strife." "You want to have internal strife just because I killed her?" Jintai stared at Bai Qi coldly and snorted. "Are you going to fall out with me because of her? Bai Qi, so what if you have served this bitch for so many years? So what if I have always been respectful to her? Your underworld royal palace, and my immortal palace will collapse just like that. What's the use of keeping this bitch?" In one sentence, he revealed the reason why he was respectful to her. "I have never expected you to be respectful to others from the bottom of your heart. I am not surprised that you have said this." The underworld saintess slowly stood up and turned to look at the distant night sky. She gave people a feeling of emptiness and said lightly, "If I am not wrong, you should want to go to the immortal world to find someone to help you out of your predicament. Jintai, if you dare to touch me, I won't say that you can't find the person you are looking for, but at least I will make you die without a burial place." "Just you?" Jintai snorted disdainfully, but his eyes slightly glanced at Bai Qi. He saw that Bai Qi was looking at the underworld saintess with a surprised expression. It seemed that he did not secretly reveal to the underworld saintess that he was going to the immortal world's ancient forest. Jintai was secretly shocked and dispelled the idea of being too presumptuous. The underworld saintess tilted her head and looked at him, and said indifferently, "You can try and touch me. Okay, we should be in the same boat at this time. Don't quarrel over such a small matter." It could be said that Bai Qi understood Jintai better, so he quickly spoke up to be the peacemaker. Jintai just coldly snorted and followed Bai Qi's way down the slope, not mentioning the matter of Yu Qianqiu again. The others remained silent and didn't say anything. Bai Qi glanced at Yu Qianqiu, who was still sitting motionlessly. He didn't see any part of him that looked like a subordinate of the underworld saintess. He turned to Nie Shaoqian and said, "You drive the flying shuttle to the ancient forest in the immortal world." "An ancient forest in the immortal world?" Yu Qianqiu, who had been maintaining his vigilance, was startled. He immediately thought of the person that Wei Chuanxiu had mentioned from the underworld saintess words. He couldn't help but mutter in his heart, could it be that Bai Qi and Jintai are looking for Wei Chuanxiu's grandfather to come out and help? Thinking of this, he immediately had the intention to follow and see what was going on. He was not in a hurry to leave. Nie Shaoqian glanced at Jintai. Seeing that her master had no intention of objecting, she immediately said, "Yes." Taking over in Gao's role, the flying shuttle turned into a stream of light and flew away. No one on the flying shuttle spoke. The netherworld saintess tilted her head to look at Yu Qianqiu, who seemed to be thinking of something, and sat down next to him. It was not convenient for Qingyang to sit down in front of the immortal emperor, so the man and woman sitting at the back were no longer crowded. Bai Qi turned back to look at the two of them, but didn't say anything. Yu Qianqiu, who was sitting next to the netherworld saintess, transmitted his voice and asked, "Who are they going to the ancient forest in the immortal world to find?" He wanted to confirm his guess. "I don't know." The netherworld saintess answered very straightforwardly. Yu Qianqiu choked for a while. "Didn't you calculate that they are going to the immortal world to find someone to help them get out of their predicament? I only roughly calculated some of their movements. If I can even calculate what they are going to do, or who they are looking for, then doesn't that mean I can control everyone's fate?" The netherworld saintess looked at him and asked, "Could it be that your bone-touching fortune-telling technique is so amazing?" Although she refused to openly admit that Yu Qianqiu had the ability to tell fortunes, her words undoubtedly showed that she really believed him. Yu Qianqiu paused for a moment, his gaze landing on her face that was half covered by a black veil. He was very curious about what the face behind the black veil looked like. Blinking his eyes, he shamelessly replied, "Of course. If you let me carefully touch your face, I'll be able to calculate who you're looking for and what you're doing. In his heart he added, I've long since calculated that you want to find the devil god for revenge. He was making irresponsible remarks, but the netherworld saintess was frightened by his accurate name. Her eyes flashed as she looked at Bai Qi and Jin Tai, and she changed the topic. Since you are so clever, why do you still ask me? Why don't you just calculate for them and find out who they are looking for? Yu Qianqiu rolled his eyes and said in confusion, I say, Taishu Xian, do you think Jin Tai and Bai Qi will let me touch their faces? My name is not Taishu Xian. You are wrong. The netherworld saintess said this and didn't say anything. So Yu Qianqiu's fortune-telling magic was stuck in his mouth and couldn't be used. After crossing the underworld and entering the immortal world, because they had to avoid as many people as possible, and at the same time, they had to hide. So even though Nie Shaoqian personally drove the flying shuttle at an extremely fast speed, it still took them half a month to finally enter a vast forest, which was their destination. Finally, they arrived at the ancient forest of the Wood Fairy province. Although they were still at the periphery of the ancient forest, they could see towering trees everywhere. The forest was dark, and the sporadic light from the sunlight dotted the surroundings. The old trees and vines were entangled, and the ground was covered with thick rotten leaves. You could hear the rustling sound when you stepped on it. The 11 people quickly looked around, and they all knew that there were countless plant spirits in this ancient forest. Finally, their eyes all focused on Jin Tai, except for Yu Qianqiu, who could guess most of it. No one else knew who Jin Tai was looking for. Jin Tai, where is the person you were talking about? Bai Qi asked, floating 1 foot above the ground. His bare feet obviously didn't want to step on the rotten leaves on the ground. He should be in this ancient forest. Jin Tai's eyes flickered as he looked into the depths of the forest. Then he asked Nie Shaoqian to give him 10 jade talismans. Holding them together in his palm, 10 faint golden light flowed out of his palm and seeped into the 10 jade talismans. He then gently waved his hand, and the 10 jade talismans flew in front of the 10 people. Everyone looked at each other, not knowing what Jin Tai was doing. One by one, they grabbed the jade talismans in front of them. Bai Qi stretched out 2 slender fingers and held the jade talismans in front of him. He repeatedly checked the jade talismans in front of him and frowned. Jin Tai, what do you mean by this? Jin Tai waved his arm and pointed around and said arrogantly, Everyone split up and search in the ancient forest. If you see an old guy with a wooden staff, he should be the person we are looking for. Immediately crush the communication talisman in your hand to summon me. Nie Shaoqian and the other immortal palace remnants paused for a moment, but they still saluted in unison. Yes, immortal emperor. Bai Qi looked at Jin Tai, and his expression twitched a little. He said in a deep voice, Jin Tai, are you kidding me? You don't even know where the person is and you brought me here? The entire ancient forest is so big. Trying to find a person here aimlessly is like looking for a needle in a haystack. How do you want us to find him? Jin Tai immediately looked at him and said indifferently, Do you have a better way? At least it's better than your stupid way. Bai Qi looked around the depths of the forest coldly and said, There are many plants in this ancient forest. As long as you catch a few and ask them, you will naturally find the person you are looking for. Humph. Kintai coldly snorted and said, I don't know how many times I've used this clever method of yours, but it's completely useless. Even in the ancient forest, that old fellow's traces are elusive. Even if it's the grass demons that live here all year round, they at most know of the existence of such a person, but no one knows where he is. As soon as these words came out, everyone felt that it was even more difficult to find him. Bai Qi paused and suddenly revealed a ruthless expression. Desperate times call for desperate measures. We can't care so much anymore. Set fire to the forest, and we will be able to force him out. If he really can help us like you said, even if we make a big commotion and alarm our opponents, we don't have to be afraid. Set fire to the ancient forest? Jin Tai's slender eyes flashed, and he said sarcastically, This is a good idea, but I'm afraid that even if we force him out, not only will he not help us, but he will also take both of our lives. Do you think that our current opponents are not strong enough? Hearing this, Bai Qi remembered that the person they were looking for was probably the wood spirit, one of the 5 spirits of heaven and earth. Setting fire to the wood spirit's territory might really anger the wood spirit. Seeing that Bai Qi didn't say anything, Jintai glanced at the others and said, "Let's split up and search. We will have a higher chance of finding him." After saying that, he turned into a beam of light and flew into the depths of the forest, seeming to be a bit impatient. The remnants of the immortal palace obeyed and scattered in the dark forest. Before Qingyang left, she looked at Yu Qianqiu and wanted to say something, but she stopped for a while. She saw that Yu Qianqiu was holding the big bright wheel, and the emperor of the underworld and the saintess of the underworld were still there. She couldn't say anything, so she turned around and flew into the forest. Who knew that not long after she flew into the forest, her mother, Nie Xiaoqian, flashed to her side. Nie Xiaoqian was obviously worried about her inexperienced daughter risking her life in the ancient forest alone, so the two of them left together. In reality, everyone knew that the wood spirits in the ancient forest weren't just for show. There were many unknown dangers hidden in the depths of the forest. The 4 scattered commanders also coincidentally met up not far away. It wasn't that they didn't want to obey the immortal emperor's decree. It was just a coincidence. Thus, the 4 of them split into 2 groups, and the distance between the 2 groups wasn't too far. Big bright wheel. My cultivation level is low, so I'll have to trouble you to take care of me. Yu Qianqiu grabbed the big bright wheel's sleeve with a smile, and the big bright wheel nodded graciously. Just as the 2 of them were about to leave together, they heard the saintess of the underworld suddenly shout, "Niu Yud, you are my subordinate, so naturally, I will be the one to take care of you." She also flashed over. Bai Qi, who was floating barefoot, looked at the 3 of them and sneered. He indifferently interjected, "Jintai has already left. Do you 3 still want to put on an act in front of me? Yu Qianqiu, we haven't seen each other for a long time." Chapter 11:11. The 3 of them looked back at the same time. Yu Qianqiu showed a puzzled expression, looking at the underworld saintess, Taishu Xian, and then at the great bright wheel, but not at himself. Of course, it was inconvenient for him to look at himself, as he didn't seem to know who Yu Qianqiu was talking about. Bai Qi stared at Yu Qianqiu, who was pretending to be ignorant, and said with a faint smile, "Yu Qianqiu, do you really want me to tear off the mask on your face to see you?" The great bright wheel's expression changed slightly, but the underworld saintess, Taishu Xian, remained calm. Yu Qianqiu was speechless. With Bai Qi's cultivation, it shouldn't be difficult for him to see that he was wearing a mask, but he didn't believe that Bai Qi could see his face behind the mask. At most, he would be suspicious, and maybe he was trying to trick him. Yu Qianqiu pointed at his nose and asked, "Is the Emperor of the Underworld calling me? My name is Niu Yud. How could the Emperor of the Underworld mistake me for Yu Qianqiu?" He wouldn't give up until he reached the Yellow River. Mistake. Bai Qi snorted, feeling somewhat unhappy, but he still maintained his gentlemanly demeanor, pointing at Yu Qianqiu and saying with a smile, "If you were standing in front of me alone, I probably wouldn't think that you were Yu Qianqiu. The Great Bright Will has a close relationship with the 2 Yao cultivators of the World Chamber of Commerce, so he must have a close relationship with you as well. As for the minor immortal cultivator, who could be favored by the saintess, I only heard her mention a fellow called Yu Qianqiu, and never heard her mention anyone else. Also, don't forget that we talked face to face in the Endless Cliffs. It's rare to see a minor immortal cultivator who needs my concentration to see their cultivation. It can't be that so many things happen at the same time, right? Yu Qianqiu, you can hide it from Lady Jean, but you can't hide it from me. I treated you with sincerity. Do you think it's necessary to hide it in front of me?" It turned out that there were so many flaws. It seemed like he had no choice but to admit it. Yu Qianqiu let out a bitter smile while rubbing his nose. He bowed to Bai Qi and said, "Emperor of the Underworld, please forgive me. I really had no choice. Yu Qianqiu knows his mistake." "It's good that you know your mistakes." Bai Qi glanced at the underworld saintess and easily forgave her. He smiled faintly and said, "Naturally, you have your reasons for hiding your true appearance. It has nothing to do with me, so I don't need to pursue it. But I think you don't want to see the heartless palace dominate the world, so we should try our best to find the person Jean Tai mentioned. As soon as he finished speaking, he immediately dashed into the dense forest. As expected, he did not pursue Yu Qianqiu. It seemed like he was trying to be friendly. The remaining three looked at each other in the forest. De Mingluan was not familiar with the underworld saintess, so he did not know what to say. He looked at Yu Qianqiu with a questioning gaze. Cuckoo! A few birds landed on the treetops, breaking the silence between the three. Yu Qianqiu glanced around and looked at the underworld saintess with a toothache. He said helplessly, Saintess, why are you following us instead of the emperor of the underworld? With our cultivation, we won't be able to protect you if we encounter danger. He also wanted to see what kind of person Luer's grandfather was, but he didn't want to bring this saintess along. Although he knew the background of this saintess, he didn't know what kind of person she was. If he got a woman with a venomous heart to stab him in the back, he would simply be finding trouble for himself. The underworld saintess Taishu Xian ignored Yu Qianqiu's words. Instead, she stared at De Mingluan and said, I have something to say to Yu Qianqiu alone. You should go further away. There doesn't seem to be anything to talk about between us. Yu Qianqiu's words were cut off by Taishu Xian's determined gaze. He scratched his nose and smiled bitterly at De Mingluan. Wait for me at a place 10 li ahead. De Mingluan nodded, cupped his fists at the underworld saintess and quickly left. After watching De Mingluan leave, Yu Qianqiu looked at the woman in front of him, scratched his head and said, Speak. What do you want from me? My original name is Taishu Xian. You didn't miscalculate. Taishu Xian looked at him and said indifferently. Yu Qianqiu stared blankly for a moment. Looking around, there was no one around him. His eyes quickly turned as a series of thoughts flashed through his mind. Previously he had been so stubborn, but now he was admitting it so easily. Not knowing what this woman wanted, he denied it immediately. Saintess, you misunderstand. I was just making it up. Don't take it seriously. You were able to guess my name just by making it up? Then I'll have to ask you to calculate it seriously. Taishu Xian didn't believe it at all. His name was considered rare, so how could it be made up so easily? She raised her hands to the back of her head, and the black sleeves on her arms slid down, revealing a pair of white arms. The black veil that had been covering her face was quietly taken off, revealing an exquisite and peerlessly beautiful face that even an angel would be ashamed of. She had a head full of black hair that cascaded down like a waterfall, and her snow-white skin was as smooth as jade. She was even more beautiful than Ji Wu. Her beauty was so shocking that it could stop the flow of time. Yu Qianqiu was stunned. His gaze was deeply immersed in that peerlessly beautiful face, and he couldn't pull himself away. Didn't you say that as long as I let you carefully feel the bones of my face, you'll be able to calculate who I'm looking for or what I'm doing? Taishu Xian's pair of beautiful eyes stared at him. The meaning behind her words was very clear. She was clearly asking Yu Qianqiu to use his bone-touching fortune-telling technique again. In fact, the reason why she was pestering Yu Qianqiu was very simple. Naturally, it wasn't because she was attracted to Yu Qianqiu's masculinity. She understood that with her cultivation talent, she would never be able to match a terrifying existence like the devil god. However, she couldn't find anyone with that ability even after searching everywhere. On the contrary, when she talked about Yu Qianqiu with Bai Qi, she had a hint of understanding. Could it be that Yu Qianqiu and Bai Changchun, whose fate couldn't be seen clearly, were the people she was looking for? Although she couldn't be sure if it was those two people, she decided to start with Yu Qianqiu. Because Bai Changchun wasn't that easy to control, she decided to pester Yu Qianqiu. As a result, Yu Qianqiu's bone-touching fortune-telling technique shocked her. Listening to his words and observing his actions, it seemed that he was much stronger than her innate talent. At first, she was a little resistant and didn't want to let Yu Qianqiu touch the secrets in the depths of her heart. However, after thinking about it, she was extremely happy. Since Yu Qianqiu was so good at fortune-telling, he might be able to calculate who could help her take revenge. Therefore, this scene happened. Looking at the beautiful face in front of him, Yu Qianqiu came back to his senses. He couldn't help but smile bitterly. He thought to himself. Indeed, dragons give birth to dragons, phoenixes give birth to phoenixes, and mice give birth to children that know how to dig holes. No wonder she was the daughter of Ming, who could attract the devil god, and the ancestor of all demons at the same time. The genes that she was born with couldn't be erased. From this, it could be seen how beautiful Ming was in the past. The beauty in front of him made Yu Qianqiu's fingers twitch. He rubbed his hands and smiled awkwardly. Since it's the order of the saintess, how can Yu Qianqiu dare to disobey? What he meant was, then I won't be polite. He pretended to be in a difficult position and strode over to her. Seeing him walking over, Taishu Xian's heart was also beating wildly. No man had ever touched her face. She bit her lips slightly and slowly closed her eyes. Yu Qianqiu, who was walking over, stretched out a finger to hook the beautiful jade-like jaw. A smile of success appeared on his face. In his mind, he was already thinking whether he should touch the soft and nice parts of the woman's body next. However, unfortunately, when he moved forward, a ray of sunlight shone through the shade of the trees and directly shone on his eyes. Disappointing, Yu Qianqiu tilted his head to avoid the dazzling sunlight. When his finger almost touched the other's chin, he looked at the delicate and beautiful face with closed eyes and suddenly paused. In his mind, Grandma Yan's earnest expectation in the boundary formation of heavens appeared. He had promised Taishu Xian that he would tell Taishu Xian that Grandma Yan missed her very much. Did he really want to take advantage of her for a moment of pleasure? Yu Qianqiu's outstretched hand slowly dropped down, and the snicker on his face gradually disappeared. Regardless of whether he would offend Taishu Xian by doing this, at least he could have a good relationship with Grandma Yan in the boundary formation of heavens. Maybe she could help him in the future. How could he lose the big picture because of a small gain? Looking at Taishu Xian, who seemed to notice that something was wrong and was about to open her eyes, Yu Qianqiu took a step back and said with a wry smile, Taishu Xian, Grandma Yan misses you very much. Grandma Yan? Taishu Xian was very moved. She opened her eyes and said with a pair of beautiful eyes, This is also calculated by you? I don't count for anything. Yu Qianqiu sighed and said, I was just joking with you. I don't really know how to read fortunes. It's just that you haven't gone back to see Grandma Yan for so many years, so I'm just giving you a slight punishment. He first denied that he had taken advantage of Grandma Yan and said honestly, I have entered the boundary formation of heavens and met Grandma Yan. I have heard Grandma Yan talk about you. Impossible. How could you have passed through the boundary formation of heavens? Taishu Xian shook his head repeatedly to express his disbelief. Without a choice, Yu Qianqiu could only roughly explain the matter of him meeting Grandma Yan. However, he excluded the matter of finding by Changchun and Shen Yu being able to enter and exit the boundary formation of heavens at will. After all, he didn't know Taishu Xian's character very well, so he didn't dare to reveal anything. Looking at Taishu Xian's expression, which showed that he had already believed him, Yu Qianqiu sighed and said, Taishu Xian, it's easier said than done to deal with the demonic god. Currently, the immortal realm and the netherworld are already in chaos. Although your cultivation is higher than mine, I'm afraid it's not enough to guarantee your own safety. You'd better go back. Grandma Yan really misses you. Go back. Taishu Xian muttered to himself in a daze. If I don't take revenge for my parents, how can I calm down and stay there? I have already conveyed Grandma Yan's words. It's up to you whether you want to go back or not. I can't force you. If you want to go back, just let me know. I will find a way to send you back. Think about it yourself. Yu Qianqiu looked at her, who was in a daze, and shrugged his shoulders. He left her alone and flashed towards the direction where the great bright wheel had left. In the depths of the dense forest 10 miles away, the great bright wheel was really waiting for him. When the two met, the great bright wheel looked behind him and found that he was alone. It couldn't help but ask, You got rid of the netherworld saintess? Chapter 11:12. Ignore her for now. Let's see if we can find the person Jintai mentioned. That person might be an old acquaintance of Wei Chuanqiu's. Yu Qianqiu's gaze searched around, thinking of where to look. Wei Chuanqiu knows him? De Mingluan was a little surprised. He didn't know when Wei Chuanqiu knew such a powerful person. He had never heard of him. He looked around in disbelief. This ancient forest is so vast. Do we really have to search one area at a time? Search one area at a time? Yu Qianqiu shook his head. I'm afraid we won't be able to find that person, even if we search the entire ancient forest. I heard Wei Chuanqiu say that the person's residence seems to be in another world. Moreover, the entrance is erratic. It's not like the other two worlds that are fixed in one place after the passage opens. It's very mysterious, so we have to rely on luck to find that person. Otherwise, Jintai wouldn't have used such a stupid method to find that person. He suddenly turned his head to look at Demingluan and smiled. Actually, we're just looking. Do we really have to risk our lives to help Jintai? If we run into him, we'll see. If we don't, then forget it. At least on the surface, we can get by with Jintai. Don't you think so? He probably didn't realize that without the World Commerce Association's subordinates in the immortal world as restraints, and after witnessing by Changchun's methods that were not inferior to the other experts at Jintai's wedding, his mentality had gradually changed. Although he didn't mean it, his tone when speaking to Demingluan was no longer as respectful as when speaking to the commander of the Chamber of Commerce Alliance. To be more precise, there was no need to act like a grandson in front of Demingluan, and the great bright will had accompanied him step by step, and he had subconsciously become a little unconcerned. Yu Qianqiu's mysterious means of sending Wei Chuanqiu and a large group of people to the Divine Ruin Realm, as well as his relationship with the Underworld Emperor and the Underworld Saintess, had all shocked him. Now he realized that this lad was somewhat unfathomable. Most importantly, Wei Chuanqiu and Yun Peng had a close relationship with this kid, adding to the fact that they had risked their lives to save him. Demingluan's mentality had changed greatly. Once the two of them finished discussing, they headed into the depths of the forest together. Walking from the edge of the ancient forest to the depths of the vast forest, one would find that the distance between the trees was getting thinner and thinner, but the individual trees were getting bigger and bigger. Even a dozen people holding hands would not be able to encircle these trees. Some of these towering trees were even hundreds of feet tall, and some of them had a canopy that could cover a radius of several miles, or even dozens of miles. The trunks of these trees were as sturdy and majestic as a city. It was hard to imagine how many years of snow, rain, wind, and frost they had experienced to grow to such a size. The magnificent trees attracted Yu Qianqiu from time to time to climb up to the crown of the trees. Standing on the branches, he looked around at the undulating green ocean. He realized that the scenery was even more spectacular and shocking than when he was flying in the sky. A gust of wind blew past, bringing with it a refreshing air. Amidst the rippling blue waves in front of him, there were also many beautiful purples and beautiful reds. There were all kinds of trees with leaves that were not green. A flock of white-feathered birds circled above the sea of trees for a while, then landed on the crown of the trees like blooming magnolia. One could even see light apes with their arms spread out, eagle cries circling in the sky, and tiger roars and ape cries below. It was a natural scene that fascinated people. Demingluan, who was standing on the crown of the tree, looked at Yu Qianqiu in confusion. He did not know why he looked so infatuated. Demingluan had not experienced the destruction of nature in the industrial era of Yu Qianqiu's previous life. As an immortal with profound cultivation in this era, he could not understand the worship of nature of the people of that era. In the future, if it is possible, I would like to build a hut in this vast sea of trees and no longer care about the gratitude and grudges of this world. Standing on the crown of the tree, Yu Qianqiu waved his hand and pointed at the green ocean in all directions. Demingluan did not know why he was sighing. Chu Tianji's eyes slightly muttered to himself, "Where there are people, there are grudges. Once you step in, it is very difficult to leave. You do not want to provoke others, but there will always be people who cannot forget about you. If you want to live in seclusion, you must have enough strength. Otherwise, how can your former enemies let you go?" How could he not know this principle? Yu Qianqiu casually plucked a leaf from the branch beside him and placed it in his mouth. After chewing for a while, the juice of the leaf was stuck in his mouth, and a bitter taste spread on his tongue. After forcefully swallowing it, He could not help but shake his head with a bitter smile. Just think about that senior Mu that Wei Chuanqiu spoke of. If he did not have profound strength, how could he live in seclusion here for so many years without anyone daring to disturb him? The two of them jumped down from the crown of the tree and continued to search. Along the way, they discovered that on the dark ground covered by the towering trees, this land that never saw the light of day all year round began to reveal a wonder of life that was completely different from the outside world. All kinds of glowing plants. The deeper they went, the more glowing plants there were. Gradually, large groups of glowing plants appeared in their field of vision. Glowing moss, glowing mushrooms, all kinds of ferns and fungus plants displayed a dazzling array of colors. There were also all kinds of vines that were like weeping willows that emitted a natural and gentle glow. Yu Qianqiu marveled at the wonders of nature. He could not help but fall into a group of lavender-like plants that emitted a gentle purple light. This immediately startled the small animals that were lurking in or around it. Butterflies spread their glowing palm-sized wings and fluttered. Beetles with star-like spots of light on their shells hurriedly fluttered their wings and flew away. Just as they landed and climbed onto a tree trunk not far away, they saw a parrot-like bird with blue feathers on its head scuttling out from the branches and leaves of the tree trunk. It quickly hunted the beetles, and then chased after the beetles that were flying around. A group of porcupine-like little fellows with a cluster of bluish-white glowing thorns on their backs quickly escaped from under Yu Qianqiu's feet. A fierce female porcupine, in order to protect her cubs, bent the thorns on her back and took the initiative to attack Yu Qianqiu. As a result, she was kicked away by Yu Qianqiu, who did not have any tender feelings for the fairer sex. She rolled a few times not far away, and quickly ran away with the group of cubs while screaming. A few ghost-like black panthers crawled out of the natural cave, formed by the roots of the tree. They stared at Yu Qianqiu with their green eyes, and let out a low growl. They seemed to be ready to attack. Yu Qianqiu ignored them. Instead, he raised his head and looked up at the tree. He saw a huge python in a colorful camouflage aiming at the black panthers below. It silently slid down the tree trunk and approached them. The black panther seemed to have noticed something from Yu Qianqiu's actions. A black panther that seemed to be the leader raised its head and looked up at the tree. It immediately let out a frightened roar to warn the others. Several black panthers quickly fled. When the huge python saw that its prey had escaped, it raised its head and hissed angrily at Yu Qianqiu. It suddenly shot over like an arrow leaving the bow. Yu Qianqiu snorted coldly. The purple flame high-energy saber that was protecting his side immediately shot out a few streaks. In an instant, the huge python was torn into hundreds of pieces in midair. It fell to the ground in a rain of blood. The gorgeous and enchanting colors were immediately mixed with the smell of blood. It immediately caused the air to throb faintly. It seemed to have triggered something. It immediately made the great Ming Luan, who was standing in the sea of flowers and on the tree trunk not far away, become vigilant. Suddenly, the ground made two soft sounds. Yu Qianqiu felt his legs tighten. He saw two tree roots that were as thick as an arm bursting out from the ground and wrapping around his legs. The roots quickly extended upwards and pierced towards Yu Qianqiu's chest like a sharp spear. Yu Qianqiu quickly grabbed it with both of his hands. He looked around and said, "What evildoer?" Before he could finish his sentence, the ground made a series of popping sounds. Hundreds of tree roots pierced towards him like spears. Yu Qianqiu shouted sternly, "You're courting death." His whole body exploded with a purple light that was condensed from a high temperature. Wherever the purple light flashed, all the plants turned into ashes. The tree roots that had shot out were instantly destroyed. A muffled groan was heard from the forest. The great Ming Luan, who was standing on the tree trunk, stared at a big tree in front of him like an eagle. He waved his sleeves, and a dozen bright moon-like light discs quickly shot out. With a series of so-so sounds, the dozens of light discs instantly destroyed the ancient tree in front of him. Audacious human! The remaining half of the big tree let out a strange cry. With a hong sound, it sunk into the ground. The dozens of light discs immediately chased after the deep pit that had appeared on the ground with a so-so sound. With a series of rumbling sounds, the light discs burst out from the ground and burrowed back into the great Ming Luan's sleeves. The originally serene atmosphere in the surroundings immediately became treacherous. It's a tree demon. Its ability to burrow underground is not bad. It runs really fast. The great Mingluan snorted and looked around. He then frowned and said, I'm afraid we've gotten into trouble. It's not good to stay here for long. It's better to leave as soon as possible. It's not that we're afraid of them. It's just that there are many plant demons in this ancient forest. It'll be very troublesome to get entangled with them. Just as Yu Qianqiu nodded his head, he heard a rumbling voice coming from all directions. You want to leave? Too late. The shadows of the trees in all directions danced in the wind. The surrounding ancient trees suddenly grew and covered the sky. In an instant they sealed off all directions. The great Mingluan flashed to Yu Qianqiu's side. Both of them floated in the air. Countless tree roots emerged from the ground. In a short while, all the glowing plants on the ground were annihilated in the churning soil. The tree roots on the ground were entangled tightly. The light in the surroundings immediately disappeared. It was pitch black. The great Mingluan looked around and snorted coldly. A group of things that don't know the immensity of the heaven and earth. If you don't move, don't blame me for killing you all. Suddenly, 8 balls of green light flashed out from the dense wall of trees. The sealed space was instantly filled with a dazzling green light. 8 green-robed old men walked out from the green light. Each of them had an angry look on their faces. One of the old men, who was wearing a green leaf crown, stared at the great bright wheel and said indifferently, So it's an early-stage immortal emperor cultivator. No wonder you dare to boast so shamelessly. Outsiders, even immortal emperors from the immortal world wouldn't dare to be too presumptuous here. How are you compared to immortal Emperor Jin Tai? Our ancient forest, and your immortal palace, have an agreement not to invade each other. Why are you killing here? Chapter 11:13. From the looks of it, this person seemed to be the leader of these people. De Mingluan took a closer look, and was slightly shocked. He realized that he could not see through the person's cultivation. He looked at the others, and found that their cultivation was similar to his. It seemed that this was going to be troublesome. He immediately sent a telepathic message to Yu Qianqiu about the situation, and discussed whether they should fight or run away. Yu Qianqiu was also stunned. He did not expect that he would attract so many experts just by making a move. It seemed that this ancient forest was located within the 3 realms, but was independent of the 3 realms. There must be something extraordinary about it. It was obvious that there were more experts in the ancient forest. It would not be good for him to make a big deal out of this. Thinking of this, Yu Qianqiu smiled faintly and said, You are exaggerating. A giant python ambushed me and I killed it. Then a tree demon attacked me first. I did not kill it because this is the ancient forest. If I really wanted to start a massacre, do you think it would have a chance to run? As he spoke, there was a buzzing sound. His entire body was instantly enveloped by purple flames like firewood that had been ignited. An intense heat surged out. The green light that was flickering on the bodies of the 8 people instantly retracted and formed a protective aura on the surface of their bodies, resisting the frightening heat that made their hearts palpitate. All of them looked at Yu Qianqiu in shock and bewilderment. All of them felt a terrifying power that naturally countered each other, causing their hearts to tremble. The pupils of the old man wearing the green leaf crown suddenly shrank, and he suddenly cried out, This is purple fire! Purple fire! Purple fire of the true Samadhi fire! The other 7 people also cried out, Purple fire? De Mingluan felt the terrifying temperature around his body. He also looked at Yu Qianqiu in bewilderment. He didn't know how many more secrets this fellow had. The tangled roots on the ground, and the surrounding tree walls were visibly shrinking with a squeaking sound. It seemed that they were in great pain. Yu Qianqiu only wanted to show off. He did not want to become enemies with them. He quickly retracted the terrifying heat and the purple fire into his body. He looked at them with a smile, indicating that he really did not have any evil intentions. Once the purple fire disappeared, the 8 of them finally stabilized their trembling souls. At this moment, they realized that they could not see through Yu Qianqiu's cultivation. The 8 of them looked at each other, and the green light on the surface of their bodies retracted back into their bodies. The entangled tree roots on the ground quickly separated, and retracted back into the soil. The surrounding tree walls also quickly retracted, and the ancient trees returned to their original positions. The hazy light began to shine down from the sky again. However, the various kinds of light plants that were buried in the soil could not be restored. The scattered light of the plants could be seen in the soil after the tumble of it. Of the light of the ground of the earth was much darker than before. I admit that your purple fire can restrain us. However, this is not a place for you to behave atrociously. The old man wearing the green leaf crown stared at Yu Qianqiu and said in a deep voice, "Since nothing serious happened, we do not want to make things difficult for you. We hope that you will abide by the agreement between us and the immortal palace. Please leave quickly." Humph. De Mingluan immediately snorted. Previously they were not so easy to talk to. It was obvious that they were here to punish us. Now that they realized that something was wrong, they immediately became easy to talk to. Yu Qianqiu glanced at him. He knew what that humph meant. However, although the purple fire was powerful, if he used it with his own cultivation, he would not be able to gain the upper hand if he really fought with these experts. The main reason was that the difference between their cultivation was too big. Moreover, he did not want to become enemies with the people in the ancient forest. "Leave quickly." Yu Qianqiu raised his eyebrows. He shook his head and said with a smile, "I am afraid that I will have to disappoint you. This time, I was invited to the Wood Killer Sea as a guest. I have not met Senior Mu yet. How can I leave so easily?" Wood Killer Sea. A few people frowned and muttered. It seemed that it was the first time they had heard of this. As for Senior Mu, there were simply too many people in the ancient forest who could be called Senior Mu. The 8 of them were no exception. It was also the first time that De Mingluan had heard of this place. However, he believed that Yu Qianqiu did not say it casually. There must be a reason for him to say it at this time. As he pondered, he felt that this Yu Qianqiu was a bit mysterious. In fact, Yu Qianqiu didn't know about the Wood Killer Sea. He had only heard Wei Chuanqiu mention it once, so he casually used it. In any case, he never had any psychological burden when he spoke carelessly. Yu Qianqiu's gaze swept across the 8 people. From the eyes of the old man wearing the emerald leaf wooden crown, he caught a trace of surprise and uncertainty. He immediately smiled at him and said, "Presumably, you should know about the Wood Killer Sea." The other 7 people's gazes immediately focused on him. They all revealed a questioning look. One of them even asked, "You really know?" The old man wearing the emerald leaf wooden crown hesitated for a while. He muttered, "In the past, when I traveled the entire ancient forest, I vaguely heard people mention that the Wood Killer Sea seemed to be the name of the ancient forest's holy land. The person who said this also heard it, but did not dare to confirm it. I did not expect to hear this place mentioned again today. I almost forgot about this name. Damn, Jintai was right. Even the old man who lived here for a long time did not know about it." Yu Qianqiu was a little disappointed. However, he heard the 7 people say in unison, "Holy Land." It seemed like they had never heard of the Wood Killer Sea before. Holy Land? Yu Qianqiu's spirit was lifted. He looked left and right and said with a mouthful of nonsense, "Yes, that's right. The Wood Killer Sea is the holy land of the ancient forest. Do you know where it is?" Everyone's gazes immediately focused on him. Although the old man wearing the emerald leaf wooden crown was somewhat mentally prepared, he still could not help but say in surprise, "The Senior Mu you are talking about is the Senior Mu from the Holy Land?" Yu Qianqiu was immediately filled with joy. Finally, he had a chance to find the place where the wood spirit lived. Although he could not devour it now, he could first find the place and mark it. Who knows, it might be useful in the future. He immediately nodded and said, Yes, it is the Senior Mu from your holy land." Although he was not sure, he was most likely right. "You were invited by the Senior Mu from the Holy Land?" The old man wearing the emerald leaf wooden crown asked in disbelief. Yes, I was invited by him." Yu Qianqiu nodded sincerely. De Mingluan looked at him suspiciously. The old man was not an idiot. After the initial shock, he realized that something was wrong. He also asked suspiciously, "Since Senior Mu invited you to the Holy Land as a guest, how could you not find the Holy Land?" Yu Qianqiu spread his hands without hesitation and said with a bitter smile, Senior Mu's cultivation is profound, and I view him as a god. He said he would let me visit the ancient forest's holy land, the Wood Killer Sea, as a guest. I naturally agreed on the spot, and I was a man of my word. But I did not know that the Holy Land, the Wood Killer Sea, was so hard to find. After searching for a few days, I did not even see Senior Mu's shadow. If you guys know where the Holy Land is, why don't you bring me there? I will reward you handsomely. He said it as if it was the truth. Was he for real? De Mingluan suppressed the suspicion in his eyes. He was afraid that others would misunderstand. You have seen Senior Mu from the Holy Land? An old man said enviously. The others were also envious. It was as if meeting Senior Mu was such a lucky thing. The old man wearing a wooden crown was envious, but he shook his head regretfully. Senior Mu is mysterious. There are only legends about him in the ancient forest. The number of people who have seen him can be counted on one's fingers. Even if they have seen him, it is a taboo. Very few people would talk about Senior Mu, so I do not know who has seen him. The gate to the Holy Land is even more elusive. Without a certain amount of luck, it is impossible to enter. Legend has it that if we wood cultivators are lucky enough to enter the Holy Land, we will receive guidance from Senior Mu. It is very beneficial to our cultivation. Unfortunately, we do not have the fortune to go to the Holy Land. The others heard this and had a look of yearning. Only Yu Qianqiu observed their expressions and said with disappointment, So, you guys do not know where the Holy Land is? Indeed, we do not know. The old man wearing a wooden crown shook his head. He suddenly paused and said, But since you were invited by Senior Mu, perhaps you can try your luck at the ancient language tree. Maybe you will encounter the gate to the Holy Land. Ancient language tree? Where is it? Yu Qianqiu's eyes lit up. The old man waved his hand and pointed to the east. In the center of the ancient forest, there is a cliff. Beside the waterfall, there is a towering tree called the ancient language tree. Its leaves are yellow and withered. It is said that it has died for countless years. But it has not died for countless years. It has experienced countless snow, rain, wind, and frost, but its withered leaves have not fallen. It is very magical. The most amazing thing is that whenever the wind blows, you can hear a strange murmur under the tree. It is as if someone is talking. This is also the origin of the name Ancient Language Tree. Unfortunately, very few people can understand what it is saying. It is said that those who can understand it can find the gate to the Holy Land. You guys should go and try. Are there many people in the ancient forest? It must be a gathering of experts. Will it be inconvenient for people from the outside world to go there? Yu Qianqiu asked in detail. He was worried that trespassing into the forbidden area would cause the experts in the ancient forest to gang up on him. The old man paused and immediately understood his concern. He sighed and said, I heard that it used to be lively there, but too many people wasted their time under the ancient language tree. But they could not understand what it said. Almost all of them returned in disappointment. Plus, it is inconvenient for us wood elementalists to leave our bodies for too long. As time goes by, except for some newcomers, no one else will go there. Hearing this, Yu Qianqiu's expression twitched, and he cursed in his heart. He felt that the old man's guidance was too unreliable. He didn't even need to guess to know that it was only a legend. If it was useful, then the Wood Demon Sea, which regarded it as a holy land, would probably swarm there every day. Chapter 11:14. The old man seemed to know that this matter was not very reliable, and was afraid of making the other party unhappy. He smiled awkwardly and said, I was just saying. Sire, please do as you wish. If there is nothing else, we will take our leave. Take care. Yu Qianqiu raised his hand to stop. He stared at the old man and slowly asked, The ancient forest is so big. How am I going to find the center? De Mingluan looked at him speechlessly. It seemed like this guy really wanted to do something useless. The old man was very honest. He waved his hand again and pointed to the east. He said with a serious expression, Go straight to the east. When you see a cliff with a waterfall and a lonely ancient tree, you will reach the center of the ancient forest. The environment there is very obvious and easy to find. You will see it when you get there. Then he kindly warned, "If sire really wants to go there, I suggest you go straight to the sky. You can more or less avoid some unnecessary trouble. You must know that not everyone in this ancient forest is kind. That is all I have to say. I will take my leave." The other 7 people also followed him, and cupped their hands. The soil on the ground surged like a fountain, and swallowed the 8 of them. In the blink of an eye, they disappeared without a trace. "Did you really receive an invitation to the wood-killing sea?" De Mingluan suddenly turned around and asked. Yu Qianqiu looked around and laughed. He did not answer the question. "Since it is like this, I will just treat it as an eye-opener. Let's go." A figure rushed into the sky and broke through the shade. De Mingluan shook his head and followed closely behind. Looking down from the sky, the ancient forest was still endless. The mountains were undulating and the waves were like the sea. It looked spectacular, but it was unknown how many dangers were hidden within. After flying at high speed for 3 days, the 2 of them who were constantly looking around suddenly slowed down and slowly stopped in the air. In front of the 2 of them was a red cliff. The cliff was exposed, and the rocks were red. It was almost barren. It was very conspicuous in this vast ancient forest. A river meandered out of the forest and crossed the cliff. When it reached the end of the cliff, it was covered by the canopy of a towering golden tree. It was as if all the river water had gathered under the tree. The sound of water splashing could be heard faintly. "It should be here." De Mingluan pointed below and said, "Yes, that ancient tree should be the ancient language tree. Let's go. Let's go down and take a look." Yu Qianqiu was the first to go down. He was stunned when he landed under the tree. The De Mingluan who followed was also stunned. There were 2 people who had arrived before them. One was wearing a golden robe, while the other was wearing a white robe, and was barefoot. The 2 were looking back. These 2 people were none other than Jin Tai and Bai Qi. It was unknown when they had met here, but since Yu Qianqiu and the Great Bright Will could find this place, it was naturally not strange for them to find this place as well. Yu Qianqiu didn't move from his spot, but the Great Bright Will flashed over and greeted the 2. "Greetings, Immortal Emperor. Greetings, Underworld King." Bai Qi's gaze fell from Yu Qianqiu to the De Mingluan. He smiled faintly and said, "It seems that they have put in a lot of effort to find this place." He turned to Jin Tai and said, "Jin Tai, do we really have to wait here for a chance?" Bai Qi's gaze fell from Yu Qianqiu to the De Mingluan. He smiled faintly and said, "It seems that they have put in a lot of effort to find this place." He turned to Jin Tai and said, "Jin Tai, do we really have to wait here for a chance?" Jin Tai turned around and looked at the vast green sea at the foot of the mountain. He pointed to both sides of the cliff and said, "You search from this side, I'll search from that side. We'll flank both sides." He then pointed to the front and signaled to De Mingluan, "All of you search from the middle." This all of you obviously included Yu Qianqiu. Bai Qi looked ahead and was silent for a while. He said slowly, "What if we can't find it?" Jin Tai said resolutely, "Then we will lure Wang Qing and the rest here, and then set a few big fires to burn the ancient forest. I want to see how long Old Man Mu can hide." Bai Qi raised his eyebrows and suddenly looked at him and said, "You mean, to kill with a borrowed knife? Lure Wang Qing and the rest here, and then set fire to the ancient forest. Then push the blame to Wang Qing and the rest, and let that Old Man Mu settle the score with them?" "That's what you said. I didn't say that." Jin Tai snorted coldly, and turned into a stream of light, and shot to the left. Bai Qi sneered, and turned to smile at Yu Qianqiu. Then he also turned into a stream of light and shot to the right. 2 rays of light, one gold and one white, flew along the cliff and disappeared into the dense forest in the distance in the blink of an eye. This red bare cliff was like a plain. No one knew how the river that was tens of meters wide was formed. Yu Qianqiu walked along the shore towards the Great Ming Wheel, under the ancient tree. From time to time, fat fish jumped out of the water and fell back into the water. When he reached the edge of the steep cliff, he saw that the river suddenly turned into a crystal waterfall, and the sound of water flowing could be heard. Incomparably thick tree roots climbed up the cliff like countless pythons, and even stubbornly rooted into the red rocks. More than a dozen tree roots drilled out from the mountain wall in the waterfall, extending down the mountain wall along the waterfall. Strong and powerful tree roots could also be seen in the river on the cliff. The exposed roots of the ancient tree occupied an area of several hundred meters on the cliff. In fact, the entire tree was small compared to some of the towering trees in the ancient forest, but it was estimated to be at least 100 meters tall. The trunk would not be able to be encircled by less than 20 people. The branches were bronze in color and spread out in all directions, and were covered with golden leaves the size of a palm. It was like a golden canopy protecting the area. The red cliff was almost barren, there was a clear river, and there was a yellow ancient tree. On the other side of the cliff was a green ancient forest, and there were blue sky and white clouds. The colors were so distinct that it made people feel like they were in an oil painting. Yu Qianqiu had taken out a flying sword at some point in time. He stood on the thick and exposed roots of the tree, and forcefully hacked at the ancient tree a few times. Unexpectedly, the sound of metal clashing could be heard. After spending a lot of effort to chop off a piece of rough bark, he turned around and shouted to Demingluan, "It's really a withered tree, but it's really hard. No wonder it can stand here for so long." After saying that, he directly sat on the thick roots and rested with his back against the big tree. Demingluan was speechless. He walked towards him and asked, "What do we do now? Do you really want to try your luck here? There's no smoke without fire. With this legend, there must be some truth to it. Since I'm here, I'll just take things as they come. If I don't try, how will I know if it's true or not?" Yu Qianqiu laughed and lay there with his hands on his head. Demingluan, who was originally worried about the future of the immortal palace after it collapsed, was also infected by his emotions. Thinking that this guy had a backup plan, there was indeed nothing to worry about. After thinking it through, he unloaded the psychological burden and relaxed his body. He walked with large strides to the side of Yu Qianqiu and laid down leisurely like him. Yu Qianqiu tilted his head to look at him and smiled. "That's right. Being relaxed is the way of the king. It's so tiring to keep a straight face all day long." Demingluan was just about to open his mouth to say something when suddenly a gust of wind blew. The golden leaves above swayed, and the whole ancient tree actually let out a faint murmur under the wind. When the wind was strong, the murmur became louder. When the wind was light, it sounded like a gentle lullaby. The two guys lying on the roots immediately widened their eyes and listened attentively, hoping to hear something. However, after listening for a long time, they still couldn't hear anything. The wind stopped, and the sound also stopped. Yu Qianqiu stared at the slightly swaying leaves above him and said, "Did you hear anything? This is clearly the sound of the wind blowing through this tree." "It would be strange if I could hear anything." Demingluan coldly snorted. "It's really just a rumor. Do you really want to continue waiting? Don't jump to conclusions so easily. Why don't we wait for a day and see? If there are no abnormal changes tomorrow, it won't be too late to leave." Just as Yu Qianqiu finished speaking, another gust of wind blew, and the ancient tree started to murmur again. The two people's ears perked up again. There were so many winds in the mountain. Every once in a while, they would hear the ancient tree humming a lullaby. This made Yu Qianqiu feel a little drowsy. Suddenly, there was a paw-paw sound in the river. A fish jumped out of the water and fell back. Yu Qianqiu suddenly sat up and wiped his face with both hands. He felt that it was too dangerous to fall asleep in a place like this. When he turned around, Demingluan had already sat up and was looking at him with a cold smile. It seemed to be saying, "You can even fall asleep here. I really have to give it to you." Yu Qianqiu smiled awkwardly and said, "I'll go get something to relieve my fatigue." Then he dashed towards the bottom of the cliff far away. Demingluan was curious about what this fellow was going to do. After a while, he saw him scurrying back from the bottom of the cliff with a big pile of firewood in his hands. He threw it on the ground, and then took out two swords and ran to the river bank to look around. Suddenly, two water pillars shot out from the water and wrapped around two fat carps. They dashed towards the swords in Yu Qianqiu's hands and opened their mouths to swallow the swords in their hands. Yu Qianqiu carried the two big carps and ran back to the pile of firewood. He took out a set of barbecue utensils. The firewood on the ground was quickly chopped into pieces and stuffed into the barbecue utensils. With a wave of his hand, A ball of red flame was spat out, and the firewood in the barbecue utensils turned into bright red charcoal. The two fat carps were still twisting their bodies even though they were dead. They were then grilled over the charcoal. After doing all these, Yu Qianqiu rubbed his hands excitedly and took out 2 jars of wine. He threw one of them to de Mingluan, who was stunned. He then opened the seal and gulped down a few mouthfuls before putting it aside. He took out some seasoning and brushed it on the dead carps. He was beautiful, but when combined with the environment at this moment and place, he really ruined the scenery. De Mingluan was really speechless. He could only sigh as he leaned against the tree and drank by himself. When the aroma of the barbecue was wafting in the air, he suddenly heard Yu Qianqiu's eh. De Mingluan turned around and saw Yu Qianqiu standing there curiously and said, "This aroma? Don't tell me the barbecue in the ancient forest also has this aroma?" He held his sword with both hands and raised it in front of his face. He fanned his nostrils and sniffed the barbecue in his hand. Chapter 11:15. What's wrong? Great Brightwill asked indifferently. He suddenly realized that this fellow's words and actions seemed to be incompatible with this world. Why would the roasted fish have the fragrance from Luer's body? It doesn't seem to be from the roasted fish. Yu Qianqiu muttered. His face popped out from behind the 2 big roasted fish and said, "Do you smell something?" "Nonsense. Of course it's the smell of the roasted fish." Great Brightwill said in a bad mood. "That's not right. Could it be?" Yu Qianqiu's eyes lit up, and he immediately looked around. De Mingluan's pupils that were looking at him suddenly shrank. He saw that the place where Yu Qianqiu was standing suddenly had a layer of transparent black ripple light wall. If it wasn't for the clear and crystalline light, it would be almost impossible to notice. And Yu Qianqiu, who was inside it, was looking around like a thief, as if he had stolen 2 grilled fish from someone. "Be careful behind you!" Great Brightwill cried out in alarm. Yu Qianqiu was shocked when he heard this. He suddenly turned around, and his entire body suddenly disappeared. Great Brightwill shot out rapidly, and a series of light wheels shot out from his sleeves, shooting towards the wall of light with the force of lightning. However, the exploding light wheels missed. That wall of light seemed to have disappeared at the same time as Yu Qianqiu. The great bright wheel that flashed away searched around the roasted fish. The 10 light wheels that were retracted circled around his body to protect him, as if he was facing a great enemy. After that, Great Brightwill flew into the sky and quickly patrolled the surroundings. Unfortunately, he couldn't find a trace of Yu Qianqiu in all directions. When he returned to the side of the barbecue set, the Great Brightwill kicked the barbecue set into the river dozens of meters away with a clang sound. He looked around his surroundings silently, thinking about what had happened just now. Normally, it was impossible for Yu Qianqiu to leave without saying a word. Furthermore, the situation just now, the Great Brightwill was suddenly slightly stunned. Could it be that the mysterious rippling light wall just now was the so-called gate of the sacred land? The more he pondered, the more he felt that it was the case. A gust of wind blew by, and the ancient whisperer tree repeated the same ancient voice that it had been murmuring for countless years. De Mingluan looked at the ancient whisperer tree, and after a moment of absent-mindedness, he shook his head and said to himself with a bitter smile, "Is this kid really that lucky? People couldn't find the door to the Holy Land, but he was roasting fish here, and he accidentally entered it? Grilled fish. Unless, otherwise, how could there be such a coincidence?" The Great Brightwill seemed to have thought of something, and hurriedly flashed to the riverside. He picked up the severely deformed barbecue set from the kick, and used his great cultivation to roughly repair it with a caw-caw sound. Carrying the barbecue set, he carefully examined the position that Yu Qianqiu had placed it earlier, and restored it to its original position. Then, he tossed the remaining dry firewood on the ground into the barbecue set, and quickly started a fire. This wasn't the end. He also took out 2 flying swords, and with a schwa-schwa sound, he stabbed 2 fat carps into the riverside. After everything was ready, he imitated Yu Qianqiu's previous actions, and also pretended to roast the fish. However, he seemed to be a little absent-minded, and would occasionally look behind him. Speaking of which, when Yu Qianqiu heard the Great Brightwill's warning, he abruptly turned around to be on guard. Before he could figure out what was going on, he felt as if he had collided with someone. His head also made a dong sound, as if he had been hit by something with a stick. In the end, before he could even cry out in pain, a soft and pleasant ouch came from the other side. Yu Qianqiu was instantly enraged. He hit someone and still cried out in pain. This was too much of a bully. Yu Qianqiu focused his eyes and saw a green-clothed little girl staggering back from the collision. When he saw who it was, he couldn't help but be stunned. The green-clothed little girl rubbing her nose also froze when she saw who it was. Lu Er. Yu Qianqiu said in disbelief. If the little girl in front of him wasn't Lu Er, who he had saved and brought back to the World Merchant Association, then who else could it be? He saw Lu Er carrying a large brown wooden staff. The staff seemed to be made from 2 intertwined tree roots, and the head of the staff was like a large lingji mushroom. It seemed to be very out of place in Lu Er's hands. Yu Qianqiu. Lu Er was also stunned. If the person in front of her wasn't Yu Qianqiu, then who else could it be? It was just that his expression was somewhat fierce, and he was carrying 2 swords in his hands, as if he wanted to eat someone who had offended him. But the strange thing was that there were 2 fragrant dead and deformed fish stuck in the 2 swords. He didn't know what he was doing. Yu Qianqiu's dull gaze suddenly moved left and right, attracted by the surrounding greenery. In the distance, there was a thin mist, and the forest was like splashed ink. The mountains were secluded, and the refreshing air was filled with the fragrance of flowers and plants. It was as quiet as a painting, as if he had fallen into a dream. The little girl carrying an uncoordinated staff in front of him was a bit of a wet blanket. Where is this place? Yu Qianqiu had 2 grilled fish stuck in his hands, and he quickly turned around to look at his surroundings. He realized that in the moment he turned around, the scenery had suddenly changed. Right now, he was standing on a hillside that wasn't considered high. His gaze fell upon an ancient tree behind him, and he was once again dumbfounded. The golden leaves and the bronze trunk were exactly the same as the ancient tree he had seen on the cliff earlier. The only difference was that the ancient language tree from before was entrenched on a red stone cliff, while this one was entrenched on a mountain peak. Looking into the distance, it wasn't quite possible to say that it was the same tree, but it was too similar to say that it wasn't the same tree. Suddenly, a gust of wind blew, and the golden leaves rustled. The familiar murmuring was like a lullaby, reverberating in his ears again. However, the surrounding scenery had completely changed, and there wasn't the slightest similarity. Yu Qianqiu looked at the ancient tree in a daze. Ancient language tree. Yu Qianqiu, how did you come in? Lu'er, who was carrying a large staff, also asked in a daze. Lua, what is this place? Yu Qianqiu suddenly turned around and asked. Lu'er, who was carrying a large staff, was stunned and said, This is Wood Killer Sea. Wood Killer Sea? Yu Qianqiu's head quickly swayed left and right, and looked around again. He said in disbelief, This is Wood Killer Sea? How is this possible? I was grilling fish just fine. Why did I suddenly come to Wood Killer Sea? F***ck. This is too illogical. Could it be this? His gaze stared at the ancient language tree with golden leaves. What is this? Lu'er, who was already confused, was even more confused. Suddenly she cried out in shock. Not good. Not good. If we don't leave now, we won't be able to leave. What's wrong? Hearing her say it so seriously, even Yu Qianqiu was shocked. Lu'er carried the brown wooden staff with both hands and activated it with a secret technique. The large staff head immediately brewed a ball of green light. As Lu'er waved the staff, a beam of green light shot towards the ancient language tree like a laser. The trunk of the ancient language tree immediately rippled with green light, and gradually emitted a black splendor. Humph! A sullen cold snort sounded, and a green-robed old man with white hair and a ruddy complexion suddenly appeared. With a wave of his hand, he cut off the green light that shot out from the head of the huge staff. His palm made a grabbing motion, and the big-headed staff in Lu'er's hand was immediately sucked over and caught in his hand. Lu'er cried out in shock, and quickly flashed behind Yu Qianqiu. Yu Qianqiu immediately protected her, and angrily shouted as if he was facing a great enemy. Who is it? You're already so old, yet you still want to snatch a little girl's things. Don't you have any shame? The roasted fish on the two swords in his hands still had a lingering fragrance. The green-robed old man looked at him calmly, and the wooden staff in his hand stood upright on the ground. He said indifferently, "So it's you. Luer, come out. He was brought in by you." Yu Qianqiu was slightly stunned. Hearing the meaning behind these words, the other party seemed to know him, but he didn't seem to have any impression of him. Luer, who was behind him, moved half her body out submissively, and one hand grabbed onto the clothes on the back of Yu Qianqiu. She looked at the old man and weakly called out, "Grandpa!" Yu Qianqiu suddenly turned around and struggled free from the small hand that was grabbing onto his clothes. He looked at Luer and said, "He's your grandpa? Isn't the old man selling snacks in hallucinatory Immortal City your grandpa? How many grandpas do you have?" Luer secretly glanced at the old man and said in a low voice, "Of course there's only one grandpa. The one you saw last time was grandpa's transformation." Upon hearing this, Yu Qianqiu was shocked and sized up the old man again. He thought to himself, no wonder even Jean Tai wanted to find him for help. As expected, he was a very capable person. Whether it was tall or short, fat or thin, his spirit was completely different from that old man last time. This wasn't as simple as a disguise, but a transformation. Supernatural power. "So you're Senior Mu." Yu Qianqiu hurriedly bowed and said. "Yu Qianqiu was impolite just now. I didn't know that you were senior, please forgive me." Old man Mu didn't care about him at all. He stared at Luer and shouted again, "He was brought in by you?" Luer pouted aggrievedly and said, "No. I also don't know how he came in, he suddenly appeared." With his understanding of the little girl, Old man Mu could tell that she wasn't lying. He then stared at Yu Qianqiu and said in a deep voice, "Speak. How on earth did you come in? If there's a single lie, I'll beat you to death immediately." Yu Qianqiu flashed the grilled fish on the two swords and said with a wry smile, "Whether Senior believes it or not, I don't know how I came in either. I was clearly grilling fish under the ancient language tree in the ancient forest. Who knew that I would turn around and inexplicably appear here? Even if you ask me to explain, I can't explain what's going on either." Grilling fish under the ancient language tree? Old man Mu's tone was filled with disbelief. He turned around and pointed his cane at the ancient language tree. Immediately, a green window appeared on the ancient language tree. Like a TV screen, the scene that Yu Qianqiu had seen on the cliff in the ancient forest appeared. Old man Mu waved his cane, and the scene slowly rotated. In the end, it was fixed at an angle. The green window showed the scene of the great bright wheel grilling fish with two swords. That guy didn't mind grilling fish, but he kept looking around vigilantly from time to time. His eyes clearly met with the three people here, but he continued to look around vigilantly, as if he hadn't seen anything. Judging from the angle from which the window was looking at the great bright wheel, Yu Qianqiu estimated that the place where the great bright wheel was observing the ancient language tree on the cliff. He didn't expect that the ancient language tree could also monitor the outside world. It was really amazing. Chapter 11:16. Before he could think further, Old man Mu waved his cane, and the green window disappeared. He reluctantly believed that Yu Qianqiu had been roasting fish outside, but this did not mean that he believed everything. He turned around and stared at Yu Qianqiu with his deep eyes. "You went to the ancient language tree in the ancient forest to roast fish? If you can't give me a reasonable explanation, although I am not a bloodthirsty person, I will not be lenient to those with ulterior motives." Yu Qianqiu secretly communicated with Utopia, and when he noticed that it was unobstructed, he immediately had the confidence to protect himself. He immediately said bluntly, "To tell you the truth, I came to look for you." "Look for me?" Old man Mu was slightly stunned and then snorted. "Did that little bat ask you to come?" "Little bat?" Yu Qianqiu was stunned, and then realized that he was talking about Wei Chuanxiu. He shook his head and smiled bitterly. "Senior, you misunderstood me. I didn't want to take the risk here, but I couldn't disobey Immortal Emperor Jean Tai's orders. So I had to bite the bullet and come here. I never thought that I would really meet you, but who knew that I would run into you?" Jin Tai asked you to look for me. Old Man Mu also showed a hint of confusion on his face. He didn't ask me to come alone. The person who was roasting fish outside just now also asked me to come. There are a total of 11 people, including Immortal Emperor Jin Tai and Emperor of the Netherworld Bai Qi. Everyone is scattered throughout the entire ancient forest to look for you, Senior. Yu Qianqiu said respectfully. Jin Tai and Bai Qi are here too? Old Man Mu's eyes turned and he asked with some emotion. Did something happen outside? Something big has happened. Yu Qianqiu sighed. From Jin Tai's wedding, to Bai Changchun's appearance, to the sudden appearance of Wang Qing, the head of the Heartless Palace, to the sudden appearance of a new force and the defeat of the Immortal Palace, to the King of the Black Mountain, Wu Feng's attack on the Dark Imperial Palace, and finally Jin Tai's decision to ask Old Man Mu for help. So they fled here to find Old Man Mu. During this period, he and the Daming Wheel encountered that group of wood demons and learned about the legend of the ancient language tree. Then, he told Yu Qianqiu roughly what had happened. This narration went on for more than an hour. Such a series of ups and downs made the inexperienced Luer's eyes light up. Her face was filled with hope, as if she wished she could be there to experience it. Although the outside world was dangerous, it had a fatal attraction to her. Although Old Man Mu had been suppressing her and wanted her to live an ordinary life, for a person like her who had never experienced the joys and sorrows of the world, how could she settle down if she could not calm down? How could she appreciate the value of ordinary life? Perhaps after she experienced the endless vicissitudes of life and understood that the past was unbearable, she would be willing to live an ordinary life like her grandfather. After a moment of silence, Old Man Mu sighed slightly and said, "It seems that it is time for the immortal realm and the netherworld to change dynasties again." Yu Qianqiu was shocked. Listening to these words, it seemed that the other party would not help Jin Tai turn over a new leaf. In fact, he also wanted this old guy to come out and help Jin Tai. After all, Jin Tai was in power, and he still had room to develop slowly. But the Heartless Palace wanted to kill him. Now it seemed that the relationship between Jin Tai and this old guy was not solid. Jin Tai wanted to ask for Senior's help. Are you going to leave him in the lurch? Yu Qianqiu asked tentatively. What do you mean by leave him in the lurch? Old Man Mu slightly closed his eyes and shook his head, saying, People don't distinguish between right and wrong. They fight for honor and disgrace. The honored will live in peace, and the disgraced will be mediocre. He asked for everything. I have seen a lot of changes of dynasties. It is because I don't want to get involved that I live in seclusion here. What does Jin Tai's life and death have to do with me? How can I leave him in the lurch? As he said this, he opened his eyes and said, Do you really want to be a lobbyist for Jin Tai? As far as I know, all the sects in the immortal realm have a grudge against the Immortal Palace. As the sect leader of the World Chamber of Commerce, don't tell me that you are willing to submit to Jin Tai. Yu Qianqiu was speechless. The other party had already said this much. He knew that it was useless to say anything else. But then again, he was just trying. If he could help Jin Tai turn over a new leaf, it would be a little good. If Jin Tai couldn't turn over a new leaf, it would be good too. That guy's character was really not flattering. The battle at the Immortal Palace had shown that even the lives of his trusted subordinates were worthless in his eyes. It made people feel too insecure. As the saying goes, when a wall is down, people push it. Yu Qianqiu was also not a good guy. After confirming that Old Man Mu would not help Jin Tai, in order to please Old Man Mu, he made up his mind to simply kill that inhumane pervert Jin Tai. After a moment of hesitation, Yu Qianqiu cupped his hands in obeisance and said, Senior, after you took Luer from the World Chamber of Commerce last time, Wei Chuanqiu reprimanded me and warned me that I must be respectful when I see you again. So there are some things that I dare not hide from you. Old Man Mu only had a high cultivation and extensive knowledge, but he was not omniscient. When he heard this irrelevant and groundless interjection, he could not help but be startled and said, What do you want to say? It's like this, I inadvertently learned of a conspiracy of Jin Tai. If I can't find Senior for help or Senior is unwilling to help, Jin Tai is going to lure Wang Qing and the others from the Heartless Palace to the ancient forest. and then set the ancient forest on fire, to push the blame to Wang Qing and the others. Jin Tai said that if he does this, Senior will definitely not let Wang Qing and the others go. Yu Qianqiu said with a respectful face, looking like he was snitching. How dare he? Old Man Mu's long beard and green robe instantly fluttered, even though there was no wind. He snorted and said, even if you give him 10 guts, he still won't dare. Yu Qianqiu was stunned. He could see that this old man thought himself to be an expert, and had probably never taken Jin Tai seriously. He did not know Jin Tai's character very well, so water had entered his brain. With Jin Tai's character, he would marry his wife with great fanfare when he was in power. But once he lost power, he would abandon his wife and subordinates and run for his life. Now that he had lost his wife, he did not even mention it. Just imagine, if he was forced into a corner, what else would he not do? However, based on the understanding between the two parties, it was not appropriate for Yu Qianqiu to argue with him. He could only take it one step at a time, and nodded repeatedly to flatter him. That's true. Unless Jin Tai is courting death, he would not dare to act recklessly. Old Man Mu indeed did not take Jin Tai seriously, and quickly put aside the matter of Jin Tai. He looked at Yu Qianqiu and said, didn't Little Bat tell you not to see Luer again? Damn it. I have told you so many things. Are you going to fall out with me so quickly? Yu Qianqiu quickly contacted Utopia, and made preparations to escape. Then he cupped his hands and smiled bitterly. Of course Wei Chuanqiu said that, but I really barged in carelessly. Please forgive me, Senior. Lu was holding his 2 swords that had pierced through the grilled fish, and looked at them carefully. Upon hearing this, she quickly nodded at Old Man Mu and said, Grandpa, he really didn't do it on purpose, just let him go this time. Ouch. Before she could finish speaking, Old Man Mu had already knocked her on the head with his crutch, and said angrily, if you hadn't stolen my crutch to open the gate, how could he have barged in by chance? You are addicted to sneaking away now. It turned out that ever since Luer went out to see the prosperous world outside, her heart had become wild. The days in the wood-killing sea were too boring, and not as fun as the colorful world outside. The last time she sneaked out, she was caught by Old Man Mu and locked up for a short while. She couldn't hold it in anymore, so she stole her grandfather's cane to open the Xianmen Gate. Who knew that Yu Qianqiu would turn around and knock her back when the Xianmen Gate was opened? As a result, the Xianmen Gate lost the support of Dharma power, and closed on the spot, dragging Yu Qianqiu, who had just stepped into the Xianmen Gate in. This matter could be said to be coincidental, but it could also be said to be uncoincidental. Not to mention Yu Qianqiu, even Luer did not know the inside story. Only Old Man Du Mu himself knew. The ancient language tree in the wood-killing sea, and the ancient language tree in the ancient forest, were actually the same tree. It was like something in a mirror that was reflected in the 2 planes. However, it was different from the reflection in the mirror. It was not an illusion but a real object. Whether it was the ancient language tree in the wood-killing sea, or the ancient language tree in the ancient forest, the ancient language trees on both sides would disappear at the same time. The ancient language tree was actually the hub that connected the 2 worlds. The ancient language tree was really ancient. It was the first tree that grew after the celestial realm was established. It could be said to be the ancestor of all trees in the celestial realm. Although it was blessed by nature and lived for a long time, it was unable to develop spiritual intelligence and cultivate immortality. However, it absorbed a considerable amount of the essence of the universe, and gave birth to the first wood spirit in the celestial realm. It was the current owner of the wood-killing sea, Old Man Mu Yuanzi. Later, due to the endless disputes between the 3 realms, Mu Yuanzi couldn't stand the disturbance, and wanted to open up a world to live in. However, with his cultivation, he was far from being able to open up a world alone. He had to borrow the magical effect of the ancient language tree, the ancestor of all trees, and use it as a medium to open up a small world. Thus, the wood-killing sea and the celestial realm overlapped. It was the ancient language tree that existed in both worlds at the same time. It was very magical. It was also because the celestial realm and the wood-killing sea overlapped, that with Mu Yuanzi's current cultivation, As long as there were plants in the two worlds, he could open the profound door at any time and go anywhere in the two worlds. However, Luer didn't have that ability. If she wanted to open the profound door and go between the two worlds, not only did she need the power of Mu Yuanzi's staff, she also needed to find a stable medium, which was the ancient language tree that existed in both worlds. Therefore, it wasn't strange that the plants in the ancient forest treated the ancient language tree as the key to entering the wood-killing sea. A long time ago, when Mu Yuanzi's cultivation was still weak, he did often open the profound door here to go between the celestial realm and the wood-killing sea. After a long time, it was inevitable that he would be seen by others. However, with his current cultivation base, there was no longer a need for him to use the ancient language tree. This was also the reason why the plant demons in the ancient forest could no longer find the opportunity to enter the wood massacre sea through the ancient language tree. It was also because of this that this matter could be said to be both coincidental and unfortunate. After Mu Yuanzi listened to Yu Qianqiu's explanation and checked the position of his roasted fish, coupled with Luer's actions, he immediately understood. Chapter 1117. Luer, who was reprimanded, threw away the sword with the grilled fish in it. Rubbing her forehead that was hit, she pouted in grievance. The people here all let me play mahjong. No matter how I play, it's always me who makes the wrong tiles. It's too boring. Playing mahjong again. You can't make any progress in your cultivation, only thinking about playing. Mu Yuanzi flew into a rage. His cane mercilessly hit Luer's head. The latter held her head and cried out in pain. Playing mahjong? Yu Qianqiu's expression had already collapsed. He looked speechlessly at the grandfather-granddaughter pair. He didn't think that mahjong had already become popular in Mu Monster Sea. Could it be that there were other mahjong friends here? Just as he was lost in his thoughts, Mu Yuanzi's cane was already pointed at him. He scolded. It's all your fault. If I see you and Luer meet again, I'll kill you with one strike. Yu Qianqiu felt a toothache. He didn't think that saving someone's granddaughter would turn out to be wrong. It was simply unreasonable. However, the situation was stronger than him. This old man was even more awesome than Jin Tai and Bai Qi. He had no choice but to lower his head when he was under someone else's roof. If he couldn't provoke him, he could at least hide. Senior Mu, this junior knows his mistake. That. Yu Qianqiu first admitted his mistake. He looked around and weakly asked, May I know how this junior should leave this place? But in his heart he was thinking, a gentleman's revenge is never too late. Wait until I plant the teleportation landmark and provoke old man by one day. Let's see who is more arrogant then. Luer, who was rubbing her forehead, suddenly widened her eyes. Yu Qianqiu, are you leaving? Her innocent eyes turned to look at her grandfather. They were filled with hope, as if she wanted to beg her grandfather to let Yu Qianqiu stay. Mu Yuanzi turned his head indifferently. He couldn't be bothered to look at her. He stared at Yu Qianqiu with a burning gaze and said word by word, You've cultivated a technique to control the wood attribute? Yu Qianqiu was stunned when he heard this. The words would spell suddenly flashed through his mind, but he did not practice it at all. He did not know why this old fellow would ask such a question. Amidst the clouds of doubt, a sudden gust of wind blew past. The golden leaves of the ancient language tree began to sway in the wind, and the murmuring of the wind sounded once again. The dreamy and illusory voice seemed to be recounting the endless vicissitudes of life, causing those who heard it to be worried. At the foot of the mountain, the forest was like a layer of mist rising in spirals from splashed ink. The mist came with the wind and blew on the three people on the mountain. Mu Yuanzi and Luer were used to this scene, so they did not feel anything. However, Yu Qianqiu felt a rich and fragrant spiritual energy seeping into his heart. His mind was instantly roused. Just as he was about to praise and flatter Mu Yuanzi, his brain twitched uncontrollably. In an instant, his vision turned black, and images of the starry night sky that he had been dreaming of appeared in his mind. The countless stars that seemed to be in a mess flipped through his mind night after night, and the speed was getting faster and faster. In the blink of an eye, the movements of the stars became traceable. However, This scene in his mind only lasted for a few moments. When the wind blew past and the fog dispersed, Yu Qianqiu woke up from his daze. Although he had woken up, his body trembled in the next moment. He looked somewhat excitedly at the mist that curled up from the ink-like layer of forest that covered the mountains and plains. The Eastern Star Map. It was the Eastern Star Map that had been deeply engraved in his mind. For so long, he had been helpless against it. However, in that instant, it had suddenly been triggered. The pattern was so clear. Could it be that this was the land of great fortune to cultivate the wood's secret art? Yu Qianqiu's heart surged in that instant. He repeatedly repeated the 3 words, "would killer see," in his heart. The grandfather and grandson both saw his abnormal reaction and followed his gaze down the mountain. They did not find anything out of place. Mu Yuanzi's walking stick suddenly slammed into the ground, causing the entire mountain to shake. He shouted in a low voice, "Are you trying to play the fool and avoid answering?" Yu Qianqiu's figure shook, and he hurriedly cupped his hands and said with a bitter smile, "Senior, you've misunderstood me. I haven't cultivated any wood attribute cultivation technique. On the contrary, Senior's warning just now has enlightened me, and I've gained some comprehension. Perhaps I really can cultivate a wood attribute cultivation technique." "Nonsense." Mu Yuanzi pointed his walking stick at Lu Er and said, "If you did not cultivate a wood secret art, how could you have smelled the fragrance on Lu Er's body? You actually dare to play such a small trick on this old man's head. If not for the fact that you saved Lu Er, you crafty scoundrel would have already lost your life under this old man's walking stick." Yu Qianqiu was confused by him. He felt that this old man was relying on his high cultivation to be unreasonable. He was both angry and amused as he said, "What does whether I cultivate a wood secret art or not have to do with being able to smell the fragrance on Lu Er's body? These are completely unrelated matters. Senior must drag it into this. Aren't you taking advantage of your power to bully others?" "Taking advantage of your power to bully others? What an ignorant junior. You actually dare to boast shamelessly in front of this old man." Mu Yuanzi's aura changed and directly pressed down on Yu Qianqiu with an unstoppable force. Lu Er turned pale with fright and stood in front of Yu Qianqiu with a whoosh. She looked at Mu Yuanzi and pleaded, "Grandpa, get out of my way." Mu Yuanzi shouted with an imposing manner, "If I want to kill him, can you stop me?" Yu Qianqiu was already prepared to run away. At this point, he also did not intend to endure it anymore. He immediately shouted angrily, "Old man Mu, killing someone is just a matter of nodding your head to the ground. If you want to kill me, just say so. There's no need to splash dirty water on me. Damn it. You disrespectful old thing. And you still have the guts to shamelessly teach your granddaughter. It would be strange if you didn't teach her bad things. No wonder Lu Er always wants to run out. Anyone who sees a shameless old fellow like you will feel disgusted." "Ah," Lu Er exclaimed. This was the first time she heard someone scold her grandfather like this. She hurriedly turned around and waved her hands at him. I didn't. I just want to go out and play. I don't hate grandfather at all." Mu Yuanzi was stunned on the spot. After so many years, this was the first time someone dared to speak to him like this. He was so angry that he laughed instead. "No one has ever doubted my character. Good. Today, I will let you die knowing the truth." As he spoke, he waved his big sleeves, and a thick aura spread out. What followed was the same fragrance as Lu Er's body, but it was even thicker than Lu Er's. It made one feel refreshed. Yu Qianqiu also couldn't help but take a few more breaths. "You smell it, right?" Mu Yuanzi looked at Yu Qianqiu's reaction and sneered. "Lu Er and I are the wood spirits of the 5 great spirits of heaven and earth. Our bodies are born with a kind of aura that represents life. Ordinary people can't smell it at all. Only those who cultivate wood attribute spells can smell that special fragrance. You still dare to say that you don't cultivate wood attribute spells? You still dare to say that you didn't lie to this old man? So that's how it is." But that wasn't right either. Yu Qianqiu looked at the grandfather-granddaughter duo with a face full of doubt. He scratched his head and said, "I do have the possibility of cultivating wood attribute spells, but the key is that I haven't started cultivating yet." Mu Yuanzi snorted coldly and said, "Don't think that I don't know what you're up to. As long as a person who cultivates wood attribute spells devours a wood spirit, not only can he possess the innate magical powers of a wood spirit, but he can also transfer the cultivation of a wood spirit to himself. If it weren't for the fact that you accidentally barged in, this old man would have beaten you to death long ago. How could you still be talking nonsense here? When Lua heard that Yu Qianqiu could devour a wood spirit, she was so scared that her face turned pale. She teleported behind Mu Yuanzi and poked her head out to look at Yu Qianqiu timidly. It was as if she had seen Grandmother Wolf. Seeing that this innocent little girl had also misunderstood him, Yu Qianqiu immediately said angrily, "Old man Mu, if you want to incriminate someone, you can always find a pretext. If this old man really had the ability you say, or the intention you say, I would have made my move when I rescued Luer back to the World Chamber of Commerce. Why would I wait until now to make my move?" When Luer heard this, she immediately nodded in agreement. She knew very well that after Yu Qianqiu saved her, he couldn't chase her away no matter what. It was she who stubbornly followed him to the World Chamber of Commerce. Moreover, those sisters in the World Chamber of Commerce were all very good to her. None of them had any ill intentions towards her. Mu Yuanzi was stunned, but after thinking about it, he felt that it was true. In the blink of an eye, his tone softened a little as he said, "Maybe you have a bigger plan. Maybe you're deliberately expressing goodwill to Luer, but in reality, you're after my cultivation." When he heard that his tone had softened, Yu Qianqiu immediately took advantage of the situation and became unforgiving. He was so angry that his face turned red, and he stomped his feet exaggeratedly as he scolded, "You unreasonable old man, why would I want you? Don't say that this old man can't find you. Even if I find you, so what? With your cultivation, it's a piece of cake for you to deal with me. Don't tell me that this old man is tired of living, so I first ran over to let you kill me, and then conspire against you? What bullsh*t logic? Who are you trying to fool?" When Luer heard this, she immediately nodded repeatedly in agreement. She didn't beat around the bush, and stood on the side of whoever she felt was right. She didn't think about her grandfather at all, as she walked resolutely to Yu Qianqiu's side, looking a little like she was siding with an outsider. Could it be that there was some other unknown reason why this brat could smell the fragrance on the wood spirit's body? Mu Yuanzi immediately fell silent. He was actually a person who thought highly of himself, and had always prided himself on being an otherworldly expert. Even the domineering demon god knight had to respectfully address him as senior when he saw him. These were all things that he was proud of. Could it be that he had wrongly accused someone? Although he didn't feel good in his heart, and although he also had a temperament that thought highly of himself, to be able to live peacefully in seclusion here meant that he was a person who could take things up and let them go. After a moment of silence, he resolutely said, "I'll let you go this time, but if I find out that you're trying to fool this old man in the future, even if you have to ascend to the heavens or dive into the earth, I'll make sure you die under this old man's staff." As he spoke, he was about to wave his staff to open the profound gate and let Yu Qianqiu leave. "Wait!" Yu Qianqiu shouted angrily and raised his hand to stop him. "Let's talk about the future in the future. There's no need to be polite with an unreasonable person like you. From today onwards, we'll return to our own paths. Let's first clear up the debts that we owe in the past. From now on, we'll go our separate ways and have nothing to do with each other. Let's pretend we've never met before." "Oh, could it be that I owe you something?" Mu Yuanzi sneered and stood with his staff on the ground, revealing an expression that didn't know what was good for him. Yu Qianqiu waved his hand and pointed at Luer. He said with righteous indignation, "Back then, there were a few experts who wanted to molest Luer. It was I who risked my life to save Luer's life, and also protected Luer's innocence. How much is this debt worth? How should this debt be settled?" Chapter 11:18. Luer was stunned on the spot as she recalled the situation back then. She didn't know whether those people who bullied her were experts or not, but she didn't see how much danger Yu Qianqiu had risked to save her. It seemed like he had scared those people away the moment he appeared. She looked at Yu Qianqiu with some grievance and pouted. Hearing Yu Qianqiu's words, it seemed like he wanted to draw a line between them. Mu Yuanzi choked for a moment. He didn't expect this fellow to act like a scoundrel, asking for a reward after doing a good deed. He was too tasteless. However, in all these years, only others owed him Mu Yuanzi favors. He had never owed anyone a favor. Moreover, this person had indeed saved his granddaughter. Since he had opened his mouth, he wasn't as thick-skinned as Yu Qianqiu to deny it. This was the weakness of a person who thought highly of himself. Yu Qianqiu took advantage of this point and acted like a scoundrel. How do you want to settle this debt? How much money do you want? Mu Yuanzi spat out word by word. He was just short of beating someone up. Although his cultivation was high, he didn't have a single spirit stone on hand. When it came to money, he really had a headache. Money? I am the dignified sect master of the world commerce. Do I still lack spirit stones? Yu Qianqiu said with a face full of disdain. I, Yu Qianqiu, have always been a straightforward and upright person. I won't beat around the bush. I am about to cultivate a set of wood attribute spells. Your wood ocean of massacre is beneficial to my cultivation. I want to borrow your precious land to cultivate in seclusion. After this, the grudges between us will be settled. How about it? Mu Yuanzi's eyes narrowed. He didn't expect that this person would dare to say he wanted to cultivate a wood attribute spell in front of him. Moreover, he wanted to do it right under his nose. It wasn't an exaggeration to say that he was extremely daring. After staring at Yu Qianqiu for a while, he stopped looking at him and turned around to face the vast sea of Mu Shahai with his walking stick and said slowly, 1 year. I'll give you 1 year's time. I don't care how long you need to go into seclusion. Once the 1-year period is over, you must immediately scram out of the Wood Killer Sea. After that, you're not allowed to meet Luer again. Otherwise, I'll make sure you die. These words meant that he had agreed to Yu Qianqiu, but he added another condition. Grandpa, Luer called out, feeling wronged. Then, she looked at Yu Qianqiu and shook her head repeatedly, signaling him not to agree. Yu Qianqiu, on the other hand, turned his head away guiltily, pretending not to see anything. Judging from his past experience, he reckoned that it would not take more than a year to practice the wood secret art. He then shouted, fine. It's a deal. After hearing the reply, Mu Yuanzi let out a cold snort. Ignoring Luer, his figure flashed and he disappeared from the mountain peak. He was not afraid that Yu Qianqiu would cause any trouble in the Wood Killer Sea. Because if something happened, Yu Qianqiu would have nowhere to run even if he wanted to. This was his territory. As long as he did not open the Gate of Wonders, taking care of Yu Qianqiu would be a piece of cake. Under the ancient language tree at the mountain peak, Luer buried her head to the side with a depressed expression, not making a sound. Yu Qianqiu rubbed his nose helplessly, coughed and said, Luer, where are your parents? It's my first time here, so I should pay them a visit. Luer is a wood spirit, how could I have parents? Luer lowered her head and muttered softly. Yu Qianqiu made an oh sound when he heard this. Then he turned to a relaxed smile and said, Luer, are you angry at me? Luer did not make a sound, indicating her tacit agreement. Yu Qianqiu helplessly smiled bitterly. With a hint of a fawning tone, he half coaxed and half begged. Luer, I want to choose a place to cultivate. Can you bring me around the Wood Killer Sea to look around? The little lass was soft-hearted and could not resist coaxing. She only hesitated for a short while before revealing a reluctant expression. She pouted and said, What's so good about the Wood Killer Sea? It's the same everywhere. Yu Qianqiu chuckled and waved his hand to retrieve the 2 swords with the grilled fish stuck in them. He directly floated in the air. When Luer also flew up, he looked around and asked, Where do you and your grandfather usually live? Luer heard this and flew into the distance without a word. Yu Qianqiu was stunned for a moment before he followed. Flying over a small plain in a valley, he saw a towering tree that had fallen to the ground and bloomed. The lush canopy covered an area of several miles. There were many egrets nesting on the canopy, and on the plain grassland that was enshrouded in white mist, there were many bison coming and going in groups. It was a natural and beautiful scene. Yu Qianqiu did not know why the little lass brought him here, But he saw Luer point at the tree on the plain and say, "There is a hole in the tree trunk that spirals upwards. It's a natural residence and it's very spacious. Grandfather and I live in there." Oh, Yu Qianqiu nodded slightly. He thought that it was naturally no problem for people to live in such a large tree trunk, so he asked, "You said that the people in the Wood Killer Sea always let you play mahjong. Are there other people living in the tree house?" "Only grandfather and I live in the tree house. Other people do not dare to come here and disturb grandfather." Luer waved her hand and pointed at the vast Wood Killer Sea and said, "They are scattered in the forest in all directions to practice. When I want to play mahjong, I will sneak into the forest to find them." Yu Qianqiu replied with an "oh." He wanted to visit the treehouse to see what it was like. However, he thought that Old Man Mu did not like him, and that going there would only be a thrill, so he dismissed the idea. He looked around and sighed. "I'd better find a place to practice in seclusion." Luer did not object, and the two went straight to the west one after another. Looking down from the sky, the terrain of the entire Wood Killer Sea was very simple. There were hills, mountains, plains, lakes, and rivers. The ground was mostly covered with green vegetation. There were no deserts, no Gobi, no seas, and no snowfields. It was a planet with green vegetation, and it was not without reason that it was named Wood Killer Sea. The area of this green planet was not big. It was at most 1/10 of the size of the human world that Yu Qianqiu was in. The two flew and stopped for less than a day, and they had already circled the Wood Killer Sea once and flew to the sky above the ancient language tree. There was nothing to be picky about here, if he wanted to practice in seclusion. Finally, Yu Qianqiu pointed to a dense forest that was enshrouded in white fog and asked, "There won't be any problems if I go to that forest to practice in seclusion, right?" "I'll go greet them. They won't disturb you." Luer, who was in a much better mood, flew down first, and Yu Qianqiu followed closely behind. The them that Luer referred to were actually some of the plant demons in the forest. They were all dressed in strange attire, and when they saw Luer, they were very respectful. Luer told them the purpose of Yu Qianqiu's visit, and the group of plant demons immediately obeyed. It was as if Luer was their master. After the plant demons memorized Yu Qianqiu's appearance, they all disappeared into the forest, and the silent Yu Qianqiu impatiently sat cross-legged in the dense fog of the forest. Seeing that he entered the state so quickly, Luer pouted unhappily. She was blaming him for burning the bridge after crossing it. Little did she know that when Yu Qianqiu descended into this dense forest that was enshrouded in spiritual fog, the nerves in his brain immediately twitched, and the vast star map in his brain was immediately activated. However, seeing that there were many living people present, he had no choice but to resist. When all the living people left, he immediately sat cross-legged and entered the state, afraid that he would miss the opportunity to comprehend the wood art. Although Luer was a little unhappy, she didn't dare to disturb him. She quietly floated a few miles away, but she didn't go too far. Moreover, she would often sneak back to observe Yu Qianqiu's movements. The forest was quiet, and the dense fog drifted. Yu Qianqiu, who was sitting cross-legged, was faintly discernible in the fog, like an old monk in meditation, not moving at all. After a few days, his eyebrows gradually locked together, as if he had encountered something he couldn't figure out. Luer, who had been secretly observing him, was very curious. She didn't know what kind of heart demon he had encountered in the process of cultivation that he couldn't resolve. So she flew and sat on the trunk of an ancient tree not far from Yu Qianqiu, and continued to secretly observe Yu Qianqiu. After another half a month, Yu Qianqiu's tightly locked eyebrows finally began to gradually relax, as if he had already found a solution to the problem. He was here in seclusion to comprehend the wood art. Outside in the ancient forest, the great bright wheel was becoming more and more anxious under the ancient language tree. The fish no longer had the mood to continue roasting, but it couldn't find a better solution, so it could only wait anxiously under the ancient language tree. However, the others, led by Jin Tai and Bai Qi, were still unwilling to give up. They continued to search in the ancient forest, and they had almost searched the entire ancient forest. In the blink of an eye, a month's time quickly passed. Luer, who felt that it was somewhat dull, gradually lost her patience. She was currently lying on the trunk of the tree with her hands supporting her chin, and her legs hooking and kicking, as she watched two praying mantises fight. Just as the two little insects were entangled and biting each other, a strange throbbing suddenly spread out from under the tree. The movements of the two biting insects froze, as if they had also sensed that something was amiss. Lua looked down the tree with some surprise. She saw that the mist around Yu Qianqiu was spreading out in all directions like ripples. Not long after, the mist in this area of the forest was completely dispersed without a trace. Lua, who was feeling strange, suddenly stood up. She turned her head left and right to look in all directions, and a strange green splendor appeared in her eyes. She immediately discovered that the surrounding trees and vines were continuously emitting indiscernible specks of green light. They scattered and fluttered towards Yu Qianqiu's body and gathered on his body. At first it was just specks of green light probing. Then it developed into patches. The specks of green light swarmed into the pores all over Yu Qianqiu's body. He's absorbing the wood element. Lua cried out in shock. Then, she quickly covered her mouth, afraid that she would disturb Yu Qianqiu's cultivation. However, it didn't take long before Lua felt afraid. The specks of green light of the wood element were pouring out of the trees in all directions at a terrifying speed, gathering on the cross-legged sitting Yu Qianqiu's body in an endless stream. Those ancient trees that had grown for hundreds, thousands, or even tens of thousands of years, as well as the vines on the ground, were all withering at a visible speed. Chapter 11:19. Once these vibrant vines and trees lost the support of the wood element in their bodies, they would wither like rotten wood. But how could Yu Qianqiu care about this? He had just successfully cultivated the wood art, and his body was extremely comfortable. He needed to familiarize himself with the wood art and absorb the wood element to form a crystal core in his dantian. How could he care about the life and death of these plants? As he became more and more proficient with the wood art, the speed at which he absorbed the wood element also became faster and faster. The endless cyan light began to converge into a flood, rolling in from all directions. The withering speed of the surrounding flowers and trees immediately increased. The fresh flowers lost their vibrant colors, the grass lost its green color and turned yellow, and the ancient, towering trees quickly lost their luster. If one looked down from the sky, they would see a brownish-yellow disk in the dense forest expanding at a visible speed. This vibrant forest was quickly losing its vitality. What made Lua terrified was that as the suction force from Yu Qianqiu's body grew stronger, the wood element in her body would also rapidly flow away. If she did not suppress it, it would converge into the surging cyan flood and be absorbed into Yu Qianqiu's body. Those plant monsters that she had persuaded to leave were also frightened. The wood element supporting their bodies was rapidly flowing away. Thus, they could no longer hide and rush back from all directions. They were all frightened after seeing what Yu Qianqiu was doing. He was simply exterminating all the plants in this forest. The plant monsters' trembling gazes shifted to Lua, who was standing on the dead tree. After everyone secretly communicated, they sent out their elders. A seemingly trembling old man leaped onto the branch of the dead tree and repeatedly bowed to Lua. "Miss, quickly stop him. Otherwise, everyone will not be able to survive." Yu Qianqiu had already mastered the wood art and could split his attention to his surroundings. After all, this was not an absolutely safe place, so he had to be careful and vigilant. In reality, he had already heard the old man's complaints, but he pretended not to know. He was at the crucial moment of condensing the wood art crystal core. So how could he stop midway? He continued to do what he was doing. Lua, who had regained her senses, looked at her surroundings and said hurriedly, "You guys quickly go back and defend your main bodies." Everyone didn't even have the time to thank him. They immediately dispersed and flew in all directions, quickly merging into their own bodies. The wood element that protected their bodies stopped leaking. Thus, in the gradually expanding brownish-yellow disk in the dense forest, some sporadic discordant green appeared. In the center of the wood-killer sea, in the hollow belly of an ancient tree on a valley plain, a stream of light shot into the sky. Mu Yuanzi was floating in the air. He had also sensed the abnormal activity in the wood massacre sea. He looked at the expanding brown circle of death in bewilderment, and was immediately shocked. He turned into a streak of light and shot over. As soon as he flew over, he could easily see Yu Qianqiu sitting cross-legged. The dense leaves covering Yu Qianqiu had withered and died. The greenwood element that was gathering from all directions was crazily pouring into Yu Qianqiu's body. Almost all the plants within a radius of 10 miles had died. Mu Yuanzi immediately shouted angrily, "How dare you? Stop at once!" Upon hearing this, Yu Qianqiu was shocked. He was afraid that the old man would stop, so he hurriedly shouted angrily, "Senior Mu, you promised to let me cultivate in seclusion in the wood massacre sea for a year. Are you going to go back on your word?" Although he had opened his eyes to speak, he didn't stop absorbing the wood element. Mu Yuanzi had already scurried down. He glared at Lu'er, as if blaming her for not stopping him. Then he stared at Yu Qianqiu and said sternly, "If you don't stop, don't blame me for forcefully interrupting your cultivation and causing you to suffer from qi deviation. Old man Mu, you're going back on your word. You're going too far." Yu Qianqiu was a little anxious and scolded him on the spot. "I promised you to cultivate in the wood massacre sea, but I didn't allow you to forcefully absorb the wood element in my wood massacre sea." Mu Yuanzi shouted angrily. He raised the wooden staff in his hand and slashed it in all directions with an imposing manner as sharp as a knife. It immediately cut off Yu Qianqiu's absorption of the wood element in the wood massacre sea. The torrential current that had lost its destination quickly flowed towards the head of the wooden staff in Mu Yuanzi's hand. Yu Qianqiu's expression changed drastically. Seeing that this old man had ruined his plan, he was so angry that he was about to use all his strength to destroy the wood massacre sea as revenge. But suddenly he was startled. Then, a joyful expression appeared on his face, and he quickly closed his eyes. Yu Qianqiu's dantian shook fiercely. He sent his divine sense into his dantian to take a look. He saw that there was another crystal core shining with a blue light in his dantian. It formed a circle with the red crystal core representing the fire art, the black crystal core representing the water art, the white crystal core representing the gold art, and the yellow crystal core representing the earth art. Yu Qianqiu was immediately overjoyed. He didn't expect that the green crystal core, that represented the wood art, would actually condense at the critical moment when the wood element was cut off. The heavens were really on his side. This meant that he had truly mastered the wood art. He couldn't be bothered to bicker with that old man anymore. Lu'er looked weakly at her grandfather. Mu Yuanzi's anger had yet to dissipate, and his eyes were filled with killing intent as he looked at Yu Qianqiu. Lu'er was secretly alarmed and anxious. Mu Yuanzi had seen people who cultivated the wood art before, but this was the first time he had seen someone who could absorb the wood element. This was equivalent to grasping the source of the wood art. He faintly sensed that the wood art that Yu Qianqiu cultivated was not simple. One mistake would most likely lead to a disaster for the plants and trees of the three realms. Should he keep this kid? Or should he kill him or not? Mu Yuanzi's expression was dark and gloomy, and he was having a great battle in his heart. On one hand, he felt that keeping Yu Qianqiu alive would be a disaster for the plants and trees of the three realms. On the other hand, if he killed Yu Qianqiu, he, who had always been aloof and virtuous, would not be able to accept it. After struggling for a while, Mu Yuanzi forcefully suppressed his killing intent. He had promised to let the other party enter seclusion for a year, but he killed him while he was cultivating. Mu Yuanzi could not bring himself to do such a thing. The main reason was that he did not want the integrity that he had upheld for so many years to be destroyed by a mere Yu Qianqiu. On the other hand, he was not afraid of what Yu Qianqiu could do. Even if Yu Qianqiu did something out of line, he was confident that he could get rid of this scourge at any time. After all, the difference in cultivation between the two of them was too great. Seeing that the killing intent in her grandfather's eyes had disappeared, Lu'er immediately heaved a sigh of relief. As for Yu Qianqiu, there was a huge change in his dantian. He did not have the energy to care too much about it. He quickly opened his eyes and looked at Mu Yuanzi. Seeing that the other party was no longer pursuing the matter, he also heaved a sigh of relief. The 10 nascent souls in his dantian had merged into one when his cultivation broke through to the early-stage minor immortal realm, becoming 9. At this moment, the 5 colored crystal cores that represented the 5 elements art had already been arranged. They were rapidly revolving around the 9 nascent souls that were sitting cross-legged. Winds and clouds surged in Yuchencho's dantian. This was not the first time he had experienced this kind of situation, and he immediately understood that his cultivation was about to break through. What he needed to do now was already very experienced. A storage bracelet containing 10 billion divine-grade spirit stones appeared on his wrist, and 2 handfuls of divine-grade spirit stones were already in his hands. Mu Yuanzi and Lu Er exchanged a glance, unable to figure out what Yuchencho was trying to do. When they turned around, they discovered that the 2 handfuls of divine-grade spirit stones, in Yuchencho's hands, had their spiritual energy sucked dry, turning from black to grayish-white. Even Yuchencho himself seemed to be frightened by his own actions. Although his eyes were closed, the muscles on his face twitched violently. The dried-up spirit stones in his hands fell to the ground with a huala sound, and 2 more handfuls of divine-grade spirit stones appeared in Yuchencho's hands. However, it felt like a cup of water on a burning cart of firewood. With 2 handfuls of spirit stones in his hands, the spiritual energy was sucked dry in a breath's time. Even after grabbing more than a dozen handfuls of spirit stones, he still felt that it was too slow. Fortunately, he had already forged his immortal physique. If it was in the past, his meridians wouldn't have been able to withstand such an overload of spiritual energy. All of a sudden, Yuchencho's arms moved, and the ground caved in, forming a deep funnel. Yuchencho was sitting in the center of the funnel. The grandfather and grandson duo were confused as to what Yuchencho was doing, but the storage bracelet on Yuchencho's wrist emitted a series of rattling noises. Black spirit stones gushed out like a fountain, filling up the entire funnel in an instant, burying Yuchencho inside. "Grandfather, what is he doing?" Luer couldn't help asking curiously. Mu Yuanzi had also forgotten about the previous matter. His eyes were filled with doubt as he shook his head and said, "It seems like he is absorbing the spiritual energy from the spirit stones to cultivate. But how can his body endure absorbing so much spiritual energy in such a short period of time? I have also never seen such a thing before. We'll know if we continue watching." Luer nodded and said, "Oh, how could the grandfather and grandson duo know that the 5 crystal cores in Yuchencho's dantian were spinning rapidly? It was like a bottomless black hole. No matter how much spiritual energy there was, it would still be sucked in without any resistance. If Yuchencho didn't use spiritual energy to fill up his dantian, then even his intestines, heart, and lungs would be sucked in." In less than a moment, the large amount of black spirit stones that were burying Yuchencho in the funnel gradually turned grayish-white. Almost at the same time that the large amount of spiritual energy in the spirit stones was exhausted, there was a crashing sound as the grayish-white spirit stones all flowed out from the bottom of the funnel. They saw a large, black hole appear at the bottom of the funnel under Yuchencho's butt. After all the dried-up spirit stones were drained, the black hole quickly healed. The storage bracelet on Yuchencho's wrist once again spewed out a large amount of spirit stones to bury himself. The grandfather and grandson duo were dumbstruck. They discovered that using this method to absorb the spiritual energy in the spirit stones was indeed very fast. Mu Yuanzi was truly speechless. He suddenly felt that he had lived all these years in vain. In the past, he had always thought that he was experienced and knowledgeable. However, today, Yuchencho had truly broadened his horizons. Not to mention anything else, there was actually someone who felt that the speed at which he absorbed spiritual energy was too slow. Thus, he used spirit stones to bury himself in a large funnel to save himself the trouble. Chapter 11:20. What surprised him even more was that even though Yuchencho had cast a technique to create such a large hole in the ground, with his cultivation, he actually didn't notice much movement. This scene caused Mu Yuanzi's pupils to shrink, and his eyelids to twitch. As time passed, the spirit stones in the underground funnel were constantly replaced. Spirit stones were continuously consumed, and there were no signs of it stopping. The grandfather and grandson duo kept watching from the side, and the more they watched, the more shocked they became. Nearly 100 spirit stones had been consumed just like that. Let alone Mu Yuanzi. Even Luer could see that it was impossible for a person's body to contain such a large amount of spiritual energy. After 100 or so spirit stones, the grandfather and grandson duo, who were gradually getting used to this, suddenly realized that the spirit stones that had been sucked dry were not replaced in time. The grandfather and grandson duo's gazes immediately focused on the inside of the funnel. Mu Yuanzi even released his divine sense into the pile of dried-up spirit stones to investigate. One day later, all the spirit stones in the funnel suddenly flowed into the ground, and the funnel that was sunken into the ground slowly bulged up. Yu Qianqiu, who was standing in the center of the funnel, also rose up. The ground under his feet became flat again, as if nothing had happened. Luer's eyes blinked, and she looked curiously at Yu Qianqiu. Mu Yuanzi looked at the smiling Yu Qianqiu and sized him up. Suddenly, his expression shook, and he cried out involuntarily. You directly advanced from the initial stage of minor immortal to the initial stage of exalted immortal? Luer couldn't help but let out an ah when she heard this. Yu Qianqiu was in high spirits, and his face was beaming with joy. He chuckled and cupped his hands at the two, saying, "This is all thanks to Senior's feng shui treasured land." Mu Yuanzi's eyes were filled with bewilderment, but they gradually returned to normal. He narrowed his eyes and said in a deep voice, "You also know how to control the earth attribute." Yu Qianqiu was startled, and he knew he couldn't hide it anymore, so he said perfunctorily, "I know a thing or two." Mu Yuanzi slowly turned around, and after a moment of silence he looked back at Yu Qianqiu and said indifferently, "I don't care what secrets you're hiding. This old man hopes that you remember what you said. After a year, scram out of Wood Killer Sea, and never meet Luer again." Yu Qianqiu was startled, and the joy on his face disappeared without a trace. He then snorted coldly, "I, Yu Qianqiu, am a man of my word. I never go back on my word, unlike some people who don't keep their word." There was a hidden meaning in his words, hinting that Mu Yuanzi had forcefully interrupted his cultivation. Mu Yuanzi wasn't an idiot. How could he not understand the meaning behind Mu Yuanzi's words? Mu Yuanzi didn't make a fuss. He stabbed the wooden staff in his hand into the ground, and a thin layer of azure light immediately enveloped the large head of the staff. The azure light rushed along the body of the staff, and when it reached the ground, it quickly spread out like ripples, rushing into the dense forest in all directions. What a dense wood attribute! So dense that it could be seen with the naked eye. Yu Qianqiu was inwardly shocked. He saw that wherever the green light spread, the withered flowers and grass on the ground immediately regained their vitality. The withered trees in the surroundings also sprouted, and new lush green leaves grew at a visible rate. Looking down from the sky, one could see a green ripple appear in the center of the withered forest, and then it quickly spread to the entire withered forest. Not long after, it regained its vitality, and the fresh green was even more eye-catching than the surrounding forest. Mu Yuanzi flew into the sky from the center of the new green, and swept his eyes across the surroundings. Then, he turned into a stream of light and flew into the distance. The legendary withered tree coming back to life. Yu Qianqiu was flabbergasted as he looked at his surroundings. These words suddenly popped up in his mind. When he came back to his senses, he discovered that Mu Yuanzi had already left, and only Luer was looking at him curiously. Yu Qianqiu looked at his hands, and his right hand suddenly condensed into a claw that covered a newly grown green vine not far away. The small green vine shook violently for a moment, and then it quickly grew, growing longer and thicker at a visible rate. It coiled around a large tree, and as it grew, the plants in a small area around it slowly withered, as if all their energy had been sucked dry by the growth of this long vine. The condensed 5 claws suddenly clenched, and the thick vine that had turned from a new vine to an old vine suddenly tightened around the trunk of the large tree. It tightened even more, and the vine sank into the tree trunk. "What are you trying to do?" Just as Luer asked weakly, she heard several snapping sounds. The vine that was coiled around the tree trunk could not withstand the great force, and actually broke into several pieces. Other than leaving a few deep marks on the tree trunk, It was not a big deal. Yu Qianqiu turned a deaf ear to Luer's words. His clenched fist once again turned into a claw, and the thick vine that had broken into several pieces violently shook and grew again. However, before it could recover to half its original length, it stopped growing. No matter how Yu Qianqiu used the wood art to speed up its growth, it could not grow again. He saw that the ground around the vine had turned yellow, as if all the nutrients on the ground had been sucked dry by it. The expression on Yu Qianqiu's face twitched, and he looked around. He suddenly opened his arms, and a fresh and clean aura surged out from his body. The surrounding vines and grass were like long snakes that had awakened, spreading and growing wildly. When they reached a certain size, they stopped. As Yu Qianqiu's arms came together, the surrounding vines whooshed over, wrapping him like a dumpling in the blink of an eye. Inside the dumpling, Yu Qianqiu spread his arms. Snapping sounds rang out, and all the vines wrapping around him exploded into pieces, scattering all over the ground. How is this possible? How is this possible? Yu Qianqiu looked like he was possessed, muttering to himself in a daze. Then, he quickly checked the storage bracelet on his wrist. The 10 spaces inside originally contained 10 billion divine great spirit stones. But now one of the spaces was completely emptied. In other words, he had spent a total of 1 billion divine great spirit stones to advance his cultivation from early minor immortal to early heavenly immortal. Seeing his dazed appearance, Luer once again asked weakly, "Yu Qianqiu, what happened to you?" Yu Qianqiu's eyes suddenly lit up, as if he had discovered a new continent. He directly teleported to Luer's side, holding her shoulders with both hands, shaking her. "Lu, aren't you a wood spirit? You and your grandfather should be proficient in wood element spells, right? Are there any killing moves among the wood element spells that are more powerful? Can you show it to me?" The reason why he lost his composure was because he felt that the wood element was too weak. He almost couldn't believe it. The wood element was the one that took the longest time, and was the most difficult to cultivate. Its power shouldn't be this weak. He thought of the earth element, which wasn't very powerful, and couldn't help but have a strange feeling. Could it be that the easier it was to cultivate, the stronger it was, and the harder it was to cultivate, the weaker it was? This didn't make sense. He guessed that he had just learned it, and had yet to comprehend its profoundness, so he asked Luer to clear his doubts. Luer hummed like an obedient baby. Yu Qianqiu smiled flatteringly, and quickly let go of her shoulders. He saw Luer look around, and then flash to a small yellow flower not far away. She stretched out a finger, and pointed at the flower. The flower quickly sped up, and as the petals withered, it had already produced a mature fruit flower seed. Luer quickly plucked it and flashed back to Yu Qianqiu. She plucked a brown sesame-sized flower seed from a bunch of flower seeds, and casually threw the rest away. That small flower seed was placed in the center of her delicate palm, and she spread it in front of Yu Qianqiu, saying, "Look carefully." Yu Qianqiu nodded his head, his eyes wide open. He stared at that sesame-sized flower seed, and held his breath in concentration. In his heart, he wondered what kind of powerful killing move such a tiny little fellow could unleash. But on second thought, as the saying goes, you can't judge a book by its cover. The more unremarkable the little fellow was, the more unexpected it might be. Wasn't there a saying that concentrated was the essence? It must not be underestimated. Luer closed her eyes slightly, and her delicate palm suddenly rippled with a faint green brilliance. Not long later, like performing magic, that tiny little fellow in her palm evolved into hundreds of similar illusions. Not long after, the illusions gradually solidified, and the brilliance on her palm disappeared. Hundreds of sesame-sized brown flower seeds laid in Luer's palm. "Did you see it?" Luer opened her eyes, and she proudly spread out her palm. What did this mean? Yu Qianqiu's face was bewildered. He was fooled by this magic-like method. He scratched his head and stared at the hundreds of flower seeds in confusion. After looking for a while, he still couldn't see any powerful killing move. He thought to himself, could it be that these little fellows could explode like an atomic bomb? He raised his head hesitantly and asked, "Luer, don't look down on their small size. Grandpa said that no matter if it's us wood spirits, or those wood cultivators, Only those who can master this move have truly grasped the true essence of the wood attribute spell. I spent many years to learn it. Luer warned him very seriously. Yu Qianqiu's face immediately turned solemn, and he thought to himself, oh my, the true essence of the wood attribute spell. As expected, the powerful ones are still to come. He nodded repeatedly and said, don't worry about this. I, Yu Qianqiu, am not an ignorant person who looks down on others. Continue, I will definitely learn humbly. Since you can absorb the wood element, that means you can also learn this move. As Luer spoke, she waved her hand like a fairy scattering flowers. Hundreds of sesame-sized brown flower seeds were scattered into the forest. Immediately after, new green buds sprouted from the ground at a visible speed, slowly growing into a plant. The flower buds also rapidly bloomed on the branches. In the blink of an eye, hundreds of newly sprouted yellow flowers swayed in the forest with a fresh fragrance. It was very pleasing to the eye. Yu Qianqiu foolishly looked at the yellow flowers without blinking, waiting for the subsequent explosion of power. He was even considering if he should move further away to watch in case he was accidentally injured. Who knew that after waiting for a while, there would be no reaction? Tilting his head to look, he saw Luer proudly standing there with her hands behind her back, looking like she was waiting for his praise. Yu Qianqiu swallowed his saliva with difficulty. He asked in a somewhat incredulous and trembling voice, Luer, it's over? Yeah, don't tell me you want to watch it again? Luer revealed a look of indifference. She turned around and found the cluster of flower seeds that she had previously thrown away. Then, she peeled off a sesame seed and placed it on her palm. She extended her hand in front of Yu Qianqiu and said, I'll demonstrate it one more time, but there won't be a next time. You better watch carefully. Chapter 11:21. It's over. I've failed miserably in a simple task today. As expected, the more harmless something seemed, the easier it was to deceive people. Yu Qianqiu immediately had difficulty breathing, his brain lacking oxygen. His face darkened as he stared at Luer and gritted his teeth. Luer, you tricked me? If they weren't in someone else's territory, he would tie her up and beat her up before saying anything else. A gentleman prefers death to humiliation. Luer was stunned. How did I trick you? Yu Qianqiu was exasperated and speechless as he pointed at the sesame seed on her palm and said indignantly, what kind of powerful killer move is this? Can plants kill people? You're still saying you're not tricking me? Killing people? Why would you kill people for no reason? Luer waved her hands fearfully. I've never learned those killing moves. Even if Grandpa told me to learn them to defend myself, I wouldn't learn them. Yu Qianqiu's embarrassment and anger disappeared. He raised his eyebrows and said, if that's the case, it's not that there aren't powerful killing moves among the wood attribute spells, but you don't know. His tone suddenly took a 360-degree turn. Like a wolf grandmother, he said patiently, does your grandpa know a lot? He remembered that Bai Changchun once said that the 5 elements spell he cultivated was a great spell of the origin of heaven and earth. After mastering it, it would be very powerful. Even Bai Changchun himself sighed at his inferiority. But now that he had completely mastered the 5 elements spell, other than his cultivation increasing a little, he didn't find it very powerful. It was far from Old Man Bai's impressive means. He faintly felt that he had a mountain of treasures, but he didn't find the key to open it. Luer nodded, then quickly shook her head. Although Grandpa knows, he won't teach it to outsiders. Teach it to outsiders again? Yu Qianqiu asked curiously. You mean, your grandpa once taught powerful killing moves to others? Luer acknowledged and said, back then, when my spiritual consciousness was first awakened, it was nurtured in Grandpa's staff, and had yet to take form. I once saw a few of Grandpa's friends coming to would kill or see from the outside world. I heard from Grandpa that their cultivations were very profound, even more powerful than Grandpa's. One of them was said to be the #1 expert of the 3 realms, called Demonic God Knight. Demon God? Yu Qianqiu was shocked. Did your grandfather impart a powerful killer move to Demon God? That's not right. Even if a normal person knew about a wood elementalist's killer move, they wouldn't be able to practice it. Could it be that the fiend celestial also knows wood elemental spells? Luer shook her head and said, No. At that time, there were many things that I didn't understand. Later on, I heard from Grandpa that Demon God Knight had many experts under him. One of them was called Demon King Clear Sky, who was also a wood cultivator. Demon God Knight once asked Grandpa for a set of spells suitable for wood cultivators for that subordinate of his. Grandpa wanted to show off that his abilities weren't bad, so he gave Demon God Knight a set of green devil seed cultivation spells. Later on, when the three realms were in chaos, Demon God Knight went berserk and led his subordinates to massacre the three realms. Only then did Grandpa know that he had caused trouble. This matter made Grandpa very vexed, and from then on, he didn't easily impart spells anymore. Green devil seed? Is that a very powerful killer move? Yu Qianqiu licked his lips covetously. Grandpa said that once the green devil seed is injected into the human body, it will silently take root and sprout in the human body. The person won't be able to detect it at all. After it completely takes over the body, it will start to take effect, and the entire person will turn green. Under the control of the caster, they will become a wood puppet. The scariest thing is that the person under the spell is clearly conscious, but their own body will no longer have the slightest connection with them. No matter how high their cultivation is, they won't be able to control themselves. They can only watch helplessly as they do things that they don't want to do, suffering mental torture, Luer said with some horror. Why was it somewhat similar to Yin Juexing's demon eye ecstasy? However, the torture that made one's consciousness remain conscious was even more vicious. Yu Qianqiu pondered and said with a frown, Is there no way to break it? There is. Luer nodded and said, Grandpa said that anyone who cultivates this art can break it. However, the prerequisite is that their cultivation is higher than the caster. Other than that, there is no other way to break it. Back then, when Grandpa learned that Demon God Knight's subordinate, the Clear Sky Great Demon King, used this art to wreak havoc in the three realms, he personally went to find Demon God Knight to denounce him. Demon God Knight made that Clear Sky Great Demon King stop using this art. After that, Demon God went to the God realm, and the demon realm was sealed, so this art never appeared in the three realms again. F***ck. One's cultivation needs to be higher than the caster, and one has to cultivate this art to be able to break it. That Clear Sky Great Demon King was able to follow Demon God, so his cultivation must be extraordinary. Then other than him, who else can break it? Yu Qianqiu said in shock. There's also Grandpa. Luer shook her head and said, As for whether there are others who can break it, even Grandpa didn't discover it. Looks like it is indeed more vicious than demon eye ecstasy. At least, demon eye ecstasy is not difficult to break. Yu Qianqiu was secretly shocked, and faintly worried that that bullshit Clear Sky Great Demon King would run out from the demon realm again. However, after thinking about it, he felt that the possibility was not too high, and he was worrying too much. He rubbed his hands and asked, Are there any other powerful killing moves among the wood attribute arts? Luer finally became alert, and she asked in bewilderment, Do you really want to learn those powerful killing moves? Having his intentions seen through, Yu Qianqiu coughed and said with a solemn expression, I just want to understand a little more, in case I fall into someone else's hands one day. It's better to be prepared. Even if you want to learn, Grandpa won't teach you, Luer said with a pout. Yu Qianqiu's expression stiffened, thinking that it was indeed impossible for the old fellow to teach him. He couldn't help but become dispirited. Seeing that he was unhappy, Luer hurriedly approached and comforted him. Actually, the true strength of the wood attribute arts is not in those powerful killing moves. It doesn't matter whether you learn them or not. Yu Qianqiu's half-lidded eyelids suddenly opened, rippling with a strange splendor. His eyes glowed again, and he moved his head closer to secretly ask in a low voice, Lua, could it be that there is an even more powerful secret hidden in the wood attribute arts? Luer said with a slightly reminiscing expression, I remember once I asked Grandpa how I was born into this world, and why I didn't have parents. So Grandpa talked to me about the 5 great spirits of heaven and earth, saying that we are the wood spirits born from the essence of the universe, and that we are the most mystical and the greatest of the 5 great spirits. The most mystical and the greatest? The splendor in Yu Qianqiu's eyes became even brighter, and he asked anxiously, "What did your grandpa say?" Lu'er tilted her head and recalled. Grandpa said that after many years of comprehension, he discovered that the 5 great spirits of heaven and earth should have their own true meaning of life, and our wood spirits is the most profound, representing the most mysterious life in the universe. Therefore, the true meaning that we pursue should be the word life. If we really comprehend the profound meaning of life, we will naturally be very, very powerful. Just this. Yu Qianqiu rolled his eyes on the spot. He wouldn't hide somewhere and slowly comprehend for tens of thousands of years, or even hundreds of thousands of years, just for the sake of some profound meaning of life. If he did that, he would definitely go crazy. His creed was that 10,000 years was too long, and he should seize every moment. Yu Qianqiu casually asked with a lack of interest, "What is the true meaning that the other 4 spirits of the 5 great spirits of heaven and earth pursue?" The little girl didn't know how to read a person's expression, and still replied very seriously, "I also asked Grandpa about this. Grandpa said he didn't know either. But Grandpa had guessed that if anyone could comprehend all the true meanings of the 5 great spirits of heaven and earth, they would very likely become immortal and reach the powerful realm of eternal life." Immortal and immortal? Yu Qianqiu thought of the fact that he had already cultivated the 5 elemental arts, and couldn't help but stare blankly. Then he snorted disdainfully. It was more like having nothing to do after eating. Just one true meaning was enough. And to spend countless years to comprehend 5 true meanings, it was more like there was something wrong with his brain. He had now completely lost interest. Just as he retracted his head that was in front of Lu'er, he suddenly exclaimed in surprise. His nostrils flared, and he stuck his head in front of Lu'er again. He sniffed a few times and looked at Lu'er strangely. "Why can't I smell the fragrance on your body anymore?" Lu'er, who was proud of herself as a teacher, had a huge change in expression when she heard this. She seemed to have thought of something, and took a few steps back. She looked at Yu Qianqiu with incomparable horror and said, "Grandpa said that humans who have cultivated the wood elemental arts all desire to devour us with spirits. Could it be that you also want to? Could it be that he couldn't smell the fragrance of the wood spirits because he had cultivated the wood elemental arts? Why was it the exact opposite of what old man Mu said?" This thought flashed quickly in Yu Qianqiu's mind. He looked at Lu'er, who was abnormally afraid of him, and felt a little helpless. He didn't know what to say. To be honest, Yu Qianqiu wasn't a good person at all. He really had the crooked thought of devouring Lu'er just now. When he saw that old man Mu was too arrogant, and thought that he was trapped in the wood killer sea and couldn't escape, he wanted to take the opportunity to kidnap Lu'er and bring her to Utopia, then see how he could devour her. But Yu Qianqiu wasn't completely evil. Facing the innocent, cute and innocent Lu'er, he really couldn't imagine what it would be like if he devoured her. He couldn't bear to do it. Instead, he hoped that Lu'er could be a little more evil. It would be best if she could be so evil that he wanted to kill her. Then, he would be able to do evil things with a clear conscience. Lu'er, don't worry, I'm a good person. I won't do those kinds of things that bad people do." Yu Qianqiu had a bitter smile on his face as he was defeated by Lu'er. Now he had his eyes on Mu Yuanzi, but Mu Yuanzi's cultivation was too high. It was not something he could deal with his current cultivation. "Really?" Lu'er asked a little timidly. "Sigh. Whether you believe me or not, I'm going to leave the wood killer sea anyway." "You don't have to worry." Yu Qianqiu looked around. He really couldn't stay any longer. It wasn't that he didn't want to continue staying in the wood killer sea, to think of a way to steal the killer moves related to the wood elemental arts. But he had unknowingly stayed here for almost 2 months while cultivating. He didn't know what the situation outside was like, and he was really worried that something would happen to the Daming Wheel. You're tuning in to the Li Mei's Sword of Destiny YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support. And don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference. as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.